Yes.
My understanding was that the board, the full board would designate the band, then the letter would be drafted from you.
Oh, yeah, no,
That's what I understood.
okay. Dr. Baste-Martinez, did you have?
I didn't have a comment, but I would certainly prefer that if we're going to move forward with this, that we make a recommendation about a band so that there's full information.
Sure.
I would not want something to be lost in the mail, and that's only said figuratively.
Right.
But if one has to wait for further information or to get something back from the board, we only formally meet quarterly.
Yes, and my understanding was that we would not have to, nothing would get lost in the mail because there would not be the full board input. Now, the other thing I need to deal with is there was a motion put forward and we sort of chimed in real quick. So I don't want to neglect that because I think that's a procedural issue. Mr. Deerking, would you like to restate your motion?
Yes, I would move that this board directs our executive committee to develop a salary band for the EO position and work with the department personnel office to implement.
So I don't know if you guys heard down here on the end, Mr. Vertito or Ms. Norton, I'm not sure if you heard that the motion is to delegate or authorize the executive committee, which is composed of Vice President Moreno and myself as board members, to develop a salary bandwidth and work with human resources to implement that.
And then presumably bring it back to the board for discussion? Or are you suggesting that you're delegating your discretionary authority away to a committee to?
It was my understanding that it would be developed with the executive team, and it would not come back to the full board for vote. That was just not because I don't want it to. That was the advice that I believe I received.
Had that been the case, I would not,
Okay.
I would have changed my vote.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood the advice given to me on the conference call. Maybe I misunderstood. So there's been a motion, but it has not been seconded. It has not actually been seconded at this time. Is there a second for Mr. Deerkins, or someone would, are we going to make an alternate motion? I do not see anyone.
I would second it.
Okay. So we now have a motion, but I'm seeing legal right something, so I want to.
I have a tendency to do that. Could I get more information about what you would be working with either the committee or the board to develop? In other words, do you have information that is sort of a set range or a set parameter or scope of possibilities that they'd be working with? Is there?
The uniqueness of the executive officer for this board is that it's not tied to a specific exempt band. The exempt pay scales have a specific band, so when most boards are looking to increase it, they're actually not really looking to increase the salary, but actually looking to increase the level. And what I mean by that is that when most boards are voting on it, it's taking a board that's either been historically defined as a small board and then moving up the ranks either into a medium-sized board or a large-sized board. Unfortunately, with this board, it doesn't fall into that category. It's in its own category on its own and doesn't fall within that scale. So that's the uniqueness that's faced before this board that you are facing with that no other board historically has to deal with. And that is why when you're voting for this, you're not voting for necessarily an exempt level increase, but rather a salary band increase.
Sure. Are you saying then that it's very broad possibilities that they have to work with then, or?
Correct.
Because I'm trying to zero in for the board that if they delegate something to the committee that there's kind of a clear direction as to what they're going to be doing, and then that delegation can include clear direction and not as much discretion.
Correct, because it doesn't fall within that scale of exempt positions with a hierarchy of the exempt positions, that it falls on its own. That is why I created the exempt chart to kind of follow as a guide to see what would be a parallel or a comparable board, at least within the state of California.
So I want all board members to be really clear, because I don't want there to be, see what I'm saying?
So could you help the board understand, is this very arbitrary once they start working with you as to where they go with this increase? Or is there, or what do you expect, or what kind of information would you give the board or a committee?
What the board would then need to, or either through the board or by way of the committee, would be to submit a document for the administration to consider in terms of outlining what has changed, what changed within the board, what changes will they foresee, what current legislation is changing the board, how is this position outgrown itself? And once that's outlined within that document, that will then also include what the recommended salary band will be, and that is what is essentially submitted to the administration for consideration.
Okay, and today, having raised the band, you don't necessarily have a recommendation today as to what that would be?
I historically don't have a recommendation in terms of what the band should be. However, I present options available to the board for them to consider, at least within the scope of the boards of DCA.
Okay, so is there kind of a set of options, a limited set?
Well, the nearest set were the three that I had submitted in this in the salary chart. Tried to keep it within the boards that deal with the Healing Arts program, and to consider what the sizing and level and licensee population.
Okay. I'm not, obviously, I'm trying to be very conscientious of time. I think given all this information, it might be a situation where if the executive committee was working things out and getting more information, they might be in a position to have to bring things back to the full board.
Mr. Deerking, was your intent for the executive committee then to bring their recommendation back to the full board in November?
Yes.
All right.
I could
To the full board at our next meeting, which may be in November, maybe earlier. Is that your intent?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. To bring the recommendation of executive committee, which is composed of Vice President Moreno and myself, to the next board meeting?
Yes.
Okay. And the second is okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, so let me clarify the motion. The motion is to direct the executive committee composed of Vice President Moreno and myself to develop a proposed recommended salary band increase, the specific increase to the salary band, and bring it to the board members for a vote. If we need to vote, Ricardo?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Mr. De La Cruz said yes. For a vote at the next meeting. This is the motion. Yes? Okay. Do I need public comment?
It's a motion on the floor, so yes.
Okay. So the motion has been clarified. I'm seeing indications that I need to ask for public comment again with the clarified motion. Is there any public comment at this time about the clarified motion? No? I'm just kind of looking to the direction they clarified that the board will direct the executive committee to develop a specific recommended increase to the band and bring it to the next board meeting for vote by the full board members.
And the increase, the request for the increase will be based on that recommendation.
Yes? Okay. I'll take a roll call vote starting on my left. Let me just write a couple letters here on my paper. Are board members clear on the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Norton?
Abstain.
Okay. Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Dr. Baste Martinez?
Abstain.
Ms. Mendoza?
I just want to make sure I understand it. The executive committee, which is me and Andrew, will meet determine a band
Recommended.
or recommend, well,
Increase.
determine, and then determine the range, bring it back to the full board
Correct, at our next meeting.
The rationale.
with the rationale.
With the
As to
rationale.
what, and then we'll vote on it.
And then you'll vote on it. So it could be voted to accept, it could be voted to not accept. Or to amend, someone said. Thank you.
My vote is yes, but Bernice,
Okay,
Becomes yes.
and so, Dr. Baste Martinez, you are changing your vote from abstain to yes?
Correct.
Thank you. Ms. Mendoza was a yes, I want to
Yes.
confirm with you. Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Mr. De Brownstein?
Yes.
Ms. Avella?
Abstain.
Mr. Deerking?
Yes.
So we have 7 yes to 2 abstentions. Motion passes. Ricardo, I still anticipate we'll be doing some work together?
Correct, and I will more than likely be here for the November meeting to help facilitate the final vote on that.
I would love to have you come to every meeting if it was possible.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you. Okay, I want to move along quickly because we do have another presenter that has been waiting all day for us.
Could I possibly make a suggestion regarding this next agenda item?
Sure.
Okay. So I've read the report. This is the audit, I'm sorry, the fee audit. Excuse me? I'd actually like to make a suggestion.
Sure.
That we actually table this item and move this agenda item to our November board meeting, so that the consultant can have the opportunity to sit with DCA Finance and possibly Kamika, or whoever she designates, to address some issues in this report. I will be a little bit more specific without going into it, is that
I do want to, I think I know what you may be talking about, and when we, I'm sorry, as I mentioned in my announcements this morning, there were actually going to be some clarification to some errors that were in the report.
Well, I understand that, but specifically regard to the material errors regarding the statement of the board's fund reserves, that is really the basis of the entire analysis and the recommendation, so I don't think that we even have an appropriate starting point. I mean, my expertise is financial, and this is a financial analysis, and the entire thing is compromised because it's materially inaccurate. So I think it would be very unproductive, and I think it would take a long time.
Sure.
So that's just my recommendation.
And I do want to give some information that last night there were updates coming through fast and furious about this item, and I did, Vice President Moreno and I and Dr. Brown did speak directly with Director Kadane last night and Deputy Director Lawley, and the proposal I made to them was to announce the corrections, and they agreed. And they are the head of, Director Kadane is the head of DCA. So I just wanted to let you know that there was, they did agree to that. DCA did agree to just announcing the clarifications. Nevertheless, we can still table it. I just
Well,
wanted you to have that.
I understand that, but I was also contacted by somebody in DCA, a very senior person who asked around lunchtime if we could please table it, because they have not had the opportunity to review it.
So that's highly, highly confusing to me. I'm actually very disturbed about that because executive committee did meet with, did speak on a conference call with DCA last night,
This is Christine.
and did speak last night with Christine
Yeah.
and Director Kadane.
Yeah, and I got a communication.
And this was agreed to. We had a executive committee conference call with the director and with the deputy
Well,
director.
regardless, I mean, we just have to make our decision.
Sure,
right?
but I know, but I need to say this because now this is disturbing to me. So this is, hold on one second. This is a little bit confusing, nevertheless. I'm not sure this was handled in the best way, but we can discuss that.
Okay, I
later.
just want to say, this was actually my thought, okay? This was my thought, and I own this thought. I had thought this days ago when I read this, so I just want to put that out there that I'm making this suggestion. I did receive confirmation of that via whatever, but this is actually my request, so.
Okay. So the only request I would like to put on the record, and for anyone who might be watching on the webcast, is that that communications at a high level, while they can be directed to any board member, of course, that's well within their right, that it would be respected communication that has been held with the executive committee and proposals that have been agreed to be respected. That's all I want to say on the record.
I'm not going to speak to somebody in DCA or the governor's office ability to talk to me, but
No, they can, but
so they have every right to discuss with me and me with them, whatever we choose. There's no limitation on that in statute, and I don't recognize any limitation.
But there is
So-
a decorum and there is a way of conducting business that I just, my only request is that that be respected. As far as...
Who are you referring to?
The fact that we had a agreement last night with the very highest levels of DCA, and then it's my understanding now that when there was a proposal to change the agreement, it was not submitted to the people that the agreement was made with, which was the executive committee and the highest level of this board.
This is a suggestion that was made that's completely appropriate. There wasn't a pact or a negotiation. I have conversations with people in the DCA all the time. Every board member has a right to do that. We exchange ideas, and it's just an idea, and it's just a suggestion. I don't respect that the executive committee can make pacts with DCA where I can't discuss it and they can't discuss it with me.
No, and let me be clear, there was no pact. There was a concern brought up, and agreement was made between the highest levels of DCA and the highest
Okay.
levels of
I have a motion. I would like to make a motion to table this agenda item until the November board meeting.
Sure, is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
Mr. DeBronstein, so there is a motion on the floor, it has been seconded. Any public comment on this issue? I don't see anyone moving forward. At this time, is there further board discussion? Dr. Baste-Martinez.
I'm a bit confused. I'm hearing my colleague, who I take at face value, say we shouldn't be discussing this, or it's not appropriate at this time. Is there anything else you can share with us that will help me understand why we shouldn't be?
Can I speak? My idea behind seconding it was when my colleague with the financial background much greater than mine says she has significant concerns. That gave me confidence that her concerns were valid enough that we wouldn't be able to express in the time we have today. So I thought it was a good second to take to the full board to say, yeah, we should or we shouldn't. We should handle this tonight or we should wait till November.
Definitely. Any other further board discussion on the,
And just for transparent, and I know I'm not supposed to, but just for Dr. Baste-Martinez, and just for transparency, the concern that was raised is not related to the numbers in front of you. It is actually related to page 13, item number 2. The item that is in regards, actually, it is not related to the calculations, nor is it related to any of those numbers. What should have been written that Madam President was going to speak to was going to be the actual reserves that we have. It was both the consultant as well as Madam President was going to speak to, that that statement is in error. However, the calculations themselves are correct, so it isn't the financial interpretation. But that statement that he wrote should actually read that that we do in fact have reserves that will go through fiscal year 18-19. And again, that was going to be something that we were going to clarify. But the actual numbers in here are not based on any erroneous information.
I would disagree with that.
Thank you.
Okay.
I disagree with that. Okay, I'm just going to say this. The issue is there's a statement in here that says that the board has completely depleted its fund balance and that it is running at a deficit. Our fund balance is, as of the end of June, $12.6 million.
That was page 2.
Okay,
Yep.
right. And the last DCA budget analyst said, I quote, because I reviewed the videotape a few days ago, the DCA is very comfortable, quote, there are no concerns at all with that. And there are further statements in this report that say we are running at a deficit, which basically means you're losing money. And we are actually running a surplus. On the last DCA report, it says 5.3. That basically means your net profit is 5.3%. And it's actually, I think, increased because the difference between $12.6 million at this June versus last year of 11.3 is 11%. So we're actually running a surplus of 11%. And my issue is these numbers and the fundamental underlying assumption behind the calculation of fees is based upon zero reserves. Okay, so these numbers that he created here is starting from a reserve of zero. Okay.
But it wasn't, and I think if we had let him speak, he would have explained that.
So
Okay,
what was going to
This
happen?
document does.
Yes.
Okay, this document does. And I guess I would furthermore say that essentially this argument is being used to formulate a recommendation. The notion that we are running a deficit, that we are in financial distress, and we have zero reserves is being used as a basis to recommend that we increase fees. And I have a problem with that.
I think that's
So,
And the clarifications that were going to be made, that I wrote out last night after DCA expressed their concerns, the specific concerns, and it was my understanding that those concerns were alleviated by the agreement that I would make the announced clarifications. I have it in my in here in front of me, was that there were going to be clarifications to page 7, and there were going to be clarifications to page 13. Mr. Eds is actually here, who did write the report. We did also speak with Mr. Eds last night, and there was a recommendation that, a correction that was going to be made about the licensing fees that had been adjustment of the licensing fees. That was a concern that was written to me by DCA in written communication to me. And on page 7 and 13, specifically concerning the reserves being depleted, there was going to be correction that, or report was sent over by Department of Consumer Affairs, and that listed the exact numbers and the board fund, which I did receive last night and was agreed upon that would be discussed today. And Mr. Eds, we did speak with Mr. Eds, and he did indicate that there was an error, and he did give some language that he meant to include, that the language that was included on page 7 and 13 was not his intent, and he was going to clarify that. So that is what happened. I don't want you to think that we were pushing this forward irresponsibly. I, of course, accept all concerns from parties and stakeholders. I heard last night what I thought was very clear concerns, and offered a way to remedy them, which all parties seemed very amenable to and content with at that time. So yeah. So there is a motion on the floor. There is a second. We haven't heard the report yet, so I won't make my clarification announcements. There's been call for public comment, yes? Yes? There's been call for public comment. I did not see anyone come forward. So I'll take a roll call vote, and the motion is to table agenda item number 20, fee audit report until until November meeting, yes?
Well, yes.
Okay. Until the November meeting. I'll take a roll call vote, starting with Ms. Norton.
Well, since we're here, he's here, I would say, no.
No, okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
President, are there no comments from anyone on the board, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we'd already...
I'm just curious.
Do you have a comment you would like to share, or question?
Who is capital auditing?
That was Mr. Eds,
Accounting, I'm sorry.
who was going to present the report to us today. We haven't gotten to that point yet. But if we do, if the vote to table dies, then we will bring Mr. Eds forward. Yes, Ms. Mendoza, it seems you have questions?
So this was a company who we requested to do this, or DCA requested to do this, or an outside agency?
So if you guys remember when Mr. Brooks was here as our acting EO, it was brought up at a board meeting that a financial, a fee audit was going to be done. That was actually something that was started by Mr. Brooks and discussed at a previous board meeting. He started that, and then we had a change in executive officer. What had been begun by Mr. Brooks was then, it just kept going. It wasn't anything new that was created. It was something already in process, is my understanding. I believe, from what the conversations I've had with DCA, but now I'm wondering, that there was also communication between Mr. Eds and the financial team at DCA, especially Taylor. I do not know his last name, so I apologize. Yes, Ms. Norton.
I guess it's comment time again. So our meetings aren't getting any shorter, and we have just changed all of the staff's flights. We've just changed a lot of the board members' flights to Northern California to 9 o'clock tonight. So I would just as soon hear this. We don't have to make a decision on it, but I would at least like to honor the gentleman's time for being here all day and our time for being on this board, and and changing everyone's agendas to go home. So at least like to hear this.
Sure. And so we were actually in the middle of a vote that Ms. Norton indicated. So motion on the floor is to table this item until November. Roll call vote has started. We have one no vote from Ms. Norton. Mr. Vertito?
No.
Dr. Baste Martinez? Ms. Mendoza?
No.
Vice President Moreno?
No.
I'm also a no. Mr. DeBronstein?
Yes?
Ms. Avella?
Yes.
Mr. Deerking?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a 6-3 vote, and the negative. That means that the motion fails. At this time, then, I would like to move forward and present item 20, fee audit report. That's Mr. Dan Eds, fee auditor. Good afternoon, Mr. Eds. Thank you for being here. Oh, okay. I appreciate the time that you've dedicated to us today. I apologize that it's 5:35, and I would like to definitely hear from you. There has been some discussion that we did speak last night, and per the concerns that were raised by Department of Consumer Affairs, I would like to make the following announcement. At this time, I want to pause to make some correction announcements regarding this report. Mr. Eds is also available and in front of us to clarify these parts of the report. Part 7, on page 7 under History of Fee Changes, just some clarification of the details. It was written that licensing fees have not been adjusted in the last 20-plus years. The board's fee structure as set forth in B&P Code Section 2895 establishes the minimum and maximum amounts of fees can be assessed at.
Madam
This was one
President?
confusion I had, because I know that my licensing fees were increased, I believe, in 2009. So we sought some clarification. The board has actually amended the specific fees charged through the regulatory process. Most notably, in 2009, VN renewal fees were increased from $120 to $150, and PT renewal fees were increased from $200 to $300, an amount which I have frequently and openly said in the past I thought was too high. But I see you also have a recommendation about that in your report. And then on to the greater question, which I'm sure there will be many questions from board members about. On page 7, it is written, the board is operating without reserves. On page 13 is written, reserves have been completely depleted, they are gone.
Madam President, is that, the pages you're referring to, are those in the one we were just handed, or the one we were given in the packet, because they don't match?
The packet that was initially sent to you.
Okay, that's okay. So I want to be able to follow along with these pages.
Yes, I'm sorry, the packet that was initially sent to you that you should have. Thank you for that, Ms. Norton. I didn't realize that there was a difference. So on page 13, it was written, reserves have been completely depleted, they are gone. We received a current fund condition statement from DCA last night that clarified the current reserves as of June 30, 2016 as 12.6 million, which is about 10.6 months. Mr. Eds, when we spoke yesterday on the telephone, you indicated that the correct language that you intended to include in your report was something to the effect of, we are running out of reserves faster than anticipated, and reserves are not depleted as of the moment, but will be soon. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted to make those clarifications, which I promised to do because there were some specific concerns about the audit report. Mr. Eds, do you have anything to say about the clarifications that I made?
Well, excuse me, just I do apologize. I often find myself in these exercises feeling the need to create a sense of urgency, and my need to do that, or my desire to do that, I think got the best of me. That statement on page 13 that the reserves are gone is an error. It should read, will be depleted quickly from the department's own budget data that they sent us here just the other day. Says in 2 years, reserves will be depleted. So I'll be happy to make that those changes to the report.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Avella?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so then those are the correction announcements that have been made.
I'm sorry, I actually have another one. So on page 12, it says, the following graphic illustrates the impact adding these additional costs to these 3 selected licenses. Essentially, 10% additional cost is required from each license to rebuild reserves. So does this table and its analysis that underlies it have the assumption that we have 0 reserves? That's the way I read that. And therefore, isn't this table incorrect, this chart, the information?
Are you looking on page 9? 12? That would be not the right one to be looking at.
Okay, this is what I got. This is what I got in my packet.
Your question does not go along with page 12, at least as I'm understanding your question.
I'm reading from your page 12 of the report I was provided with.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Mr. Eds, would you?
Oh, thank you. Okay, Sue, could you repeat the question for me?
Well, on page 12, it says the following graphic illustrates the impact adding these additional costs to these 3 selected licenses, your allocated costs. Essentially, 10% additional cost is required from each license to rebuild reserves. What that says to me is that your calculation of the additional costs and fees that we need to charge is based upon the assumption that we have 0 reserves. So this table, which is the crux of the analysis, that says what our additional license fees should be, is incorrect.
Right, okay. So let me respond to that, because your point is well taken.
Well, can you say yes or no?
I'm sorry?
Is this table correct?
It is correct based on the analysis that I did.
Okay, and the analysis you did was incorrect because you said we have 0 reserves.
So at some point, you're going to have to start rebuilding the reserves.
Okay, I've not seen anything that shows that the BVNPT is projected to deplete its reserves. So this is another reason why I would like to have all the information from DCA budget to accurately analyze this. There's no way I can respond to this when I've not been provided that information or even can verify that information exists.
Mr. Eds, would you like to, we have not presented your report yet. We did have a motion on whether to table, and that did fail, unfortunately, Ms. Avella. So at this point, board members did request to hear your report, so I would like you to proceed with your report.
So the DCA Budget Office has established that in 2 years, your reserves will be depleted. So at some point, you're going to have to start rebuilding those reserves. Unless you make a decision tonight to adopt the fee schedule as is, you could adopt it with the reserve calculations that I put in there or without. At some point, though, if you delay that, then you're going to have to start rebuilding reserves. So the reserve amount that you see on page 12, that basically 10%, that does in fact assume that you have no reserves today. But if it takes a year to go through the process of establishing a new fee schedule, then those reserves are going to be lower. Your current reserves are going to be lower. If it takes 2 years, they're going to be 0. So looking at the worst case scenario in adopting a new fee schedule, we assumed that it's 0. Because I know that it can take a long period of time to get it through the statute.
Can I ask another question? Yep. So you said in 2 years our reserves will be fully depleted, correct? So are you talking about at the end of fiscal year what?
I believe it's 18-19.
Okay, I have directly conflicting information from the DCA that we will have reserves. So this, again, is the issue. I don't know how to evaluate this.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Mr. Eds?
Okay, should I move on?
Yes, I would like you to present your report.
Okay,
please.
all right. So, and I do appreciate the comments and observations. And frankly, I think with those, it would not hurt my feelings if you wanted to do another analysis. I'm happy to go through the analysis with the budget office. I do that routinely when I do these, and it might be even more appropriate to wait until November. That being said, let me also just quickly acknowledge Dr. Brown and her staff, principally these ladies over here. I do a lot of these kinds of projects. I do them for the Department of Consumer Affairs. I do a lot of them for cities and counties, and they all have been just terrific to work with. They've been very responsive. These projects are a project of collaboration, and they have been very much available to me when I've needed them. Page 2 on your PowerPoint presentation.
So that's the one that you just gave us?
The one you were just handed, yes. Presentation outline. This presentation, the outline of this presentation will be talking about the scope and methodology. Number 2, the current state of the Board for Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians. Part of this, we want to review the net revenues, we want to review operations, review enforcement-related costs, review the fee structure, or the review or the restructuring of the fees, and then recommended next steps and recommendations. Page 3, and I do have a place in the very back of the presentation for questions, but quickly, if you do have questions along the way, please feel free to ask. I will also ask, I have a few places where I will ask for any questions. So the scope and methodology, subtitle, developing a plan for long-term sustainability. This is the sixth project like this for the department. And in virtually every one, there is some question of long-term sustainability. I have seen them where they were literally one about a year ago, a very large, well-known board They were down to just a handful of months in reserves, and they were going to be in fiscal deficit within 12 months of completing that project. On page 4, project scope. Project scope was to calculate the full cost of processing licenses for individual licensees and educational institutions, to calculate the direct cost of processing licenses and the allocation of support costs, such as investigations, enforcement, and other support functions that may apply. Finally, to develop revenue and fee projections for 5 to 10 years so that you can appropriately set the level of caps, and then adjust your fees on the regulatory process in the interim. Let me just point out that one of the biggest pieces of these kinds of projects is to looking at the allocations of additional costs like investigations and enforcement. As I will show you in a few minutes, cost of enforcement and investigations is the single largest component of cost. Slide number 5, a very high-level overview of how the project goes. First of all, we do try to calculate the full cost more at the division level, looking at both division cost as well as incoming costs from the department as well as the state. We also look at the core business processes. I liken this as looking at costs from the ground up. We spend a lot of time trying to understand the core business processes. In this exercise, it's very much not about getting some numbers, throwing them into an Excel spreadsheet, and having the spreadsheet spit out some numbers. We spend a lot of time with staff, spend a lot of time with these ladies over here, multiple meetings, trying to understand and document their activities and their processes to get a very good understanding of operations. And then finally, how do we allocate costs such as enforcement, cash sharing, investigations, et cetera. Broad picture of the process. Any question about that? Hearing none. We also do have some quality checks. Obviously, there is a very simple, basic qualitative check on quality. Meeting with Dr. Brown. Dr. Brown, do these numbers look reasonable to you? Yes or no? Cheryl and the rest of her staff, what do these costs look like to you? Are they reasonable? I happen to take that kind of a perspective of value, but we also have some quantitative checks. One of those is looking at resources. So this number is $16 million. This includes the resources that has been requested by Dr. Brown for the additional staffing that she's requesting. So if I put $16 million of cost into the model, I need to have $16 million of cost coming out. Also, hours available. If we have 775,000 productive hours of staff time available, I need to account for 175,000 hours of staff time. This happens to be a very important piece of our analysis. If any one of these numbers are out of line, it suggests to me that there's an error someplace. We've got some additional data that we need to find. There's holes in the analysis, and we don't really stop until we get balance between the total number of resources coming into the model as well as coming out of the model, and then staff resources and their time that we have available, making sure that we're accounting for 100% of that time, not for 99% of that time, and not for 110% of that time. Any question about that? Okay. Building a sustainable future. Let's flip, if you wouldn't mind, flip forward to page 8. Net revenues, as you can see there on the blue bar on the left, actual for 14-15 was $435,000. Projection for 15-16 is $66,000, and the math of this is pretty simple. We look at what's the revenue being generated from fees, and that math is you do 50 of any individual fee, and the cost is 200, you just do the math and you add it all up. And also that is for 15, 16 is a projection as of roughly March. So it might actually be different as of the end of the year. Month 13 year revenues would have just come out. One of my other clients, it just came out this past week, so I'm not sure if it's come out yet for this particular board.
Mr. Durkin?
Yeah, do the net revenues, does that include cost recovery associated with discipline orders?
Great question. So if it's a fee, if it's a fine, I tend to discount those because that's revenue that you can't count on. You don't have any control over it. In fact, if a issue goes to a judge, the judge can throw the whole thing out. So in doing the analysis, I tend to discount that.
I have a question too. Go ahead.
I was going to ask it, what rate do you discount? Do you just throw it all out, or?
Yeah, I ignore it.
Okay.
It's minor. It's not very much anyway.
Can you, how do you define net revenues?
Good question. So net revenues, again, the math is simple. It's how many times any individual fee is processed on an annual basis.
How many, I'm sorry, what? How
many times an individual fee is processed on an annual basis. So there's a fee for a renewal, renewal of a license. How many times are those things processed on a year? Multiplied times the price of the fee.
So how can that be a negative number?
Negative number relative to expenses.
Okay, so are we saying that the BVNPT's P&L for fiscal year 16-17 is going to be a net deficit of almost $2 million? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Can we have the underlying projections that support this? Because we're being asked, excuse me?
I can, but that's going to take some additional time. And if you'd like to go into that, I'd be happy to spend the time with you to do that.
Okay, so not only is this a very significant departure from what I understand our trajectory is, you're using this number in your analysis to justify why we should increase fees, and I haven't even seen this projection. I mean, I haven't seen any of the line items. So I'm supposed to accept that we're going to lose $1.9 million next year. I don't have any support for it. You're not providing any P&L, but I need to kind of make my decision about whether we're going to increase our fees on the basis of that.
Sure.
I don't obviously agree with that.
Any other board member comments? Ms. Norton?
The revenues that the board gets strictly comes from renewal fees, licensing fees, all the fees from the applicants, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you discount any fines or cost recovery because we can't rely on it. But in our expenses, you count the cost of the investigations that are done as actual costs, because those are actual costs. It's
Very
just the
much so.
recovery of those costs that you
Right.
discount.
Right.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Yes.
I have more,
Other
a lot
question?
more. Okay, so since we don't have any of these projections, I mean, I really need to know what some of your assumptions are on our business. You know, you're going to have to explain what growth rates did you use in terms of licensees, and you're going to have to explain your expenses. I know that you put something in here about enforcement expenses, which is a very big category. You know, I've thought about that a lot. Gina's not here. But in terms of enforcement, what I will tell you, in my assumptions would probably include that in our enforcement, we've fundamentally changed a lot of what we do. Okay, and now we settle about 3 times as many cases as we used to. Okay, so settling cases, You can't hear me?
I've got some conflicting noise going on here.
Okay, so I'm using this as one example. I don't want to go into this, but I want to make sure, and I want to understand the basis that you created your assumptions on our P&L. And that would actually take a really long time, especially since we don't have them and we don't have your P&L. But on one example, enforcement is a huge key here, right? When I think about enforcement, there are several factors that to me actually will make our enforcement costs potentially go down over the next few years. And I want to know if you considered those. As an example, we now settle 3 times as many cases as we used to. So that's going to actually save costs because we don't go through the entire formal discipline process. We're also going to see, at least in the next couple of years, a significant reduction likely in the number of cases that we actually process because we've actually changed the minimum requirement for reporting offenses from $300 to $1,000. So that's going to actually result in a lot less cases and complaints for us. We also have had significant management changes in terms of management efficiency and effectiveness. And there were also, it's my understanding, again, Gina isn't here.
She's here.
Oh, she is, about just generally not opening up many cases. So anyway, what I'm trying to do is create an argument that these assumptions about the BVNT's financial projection are extremely important, and we're not being provided with that, and we're not being provided with that. So tell me, what were your assumptions on enforcement, and what are the things that you considered?
Right. Dr. Brown, do you anticipate any lowering of enforcement costs as in terms of reducing FTE?
Repeat your question.
Do you anticipate having the opportunity to reduce enforcement cost, meaning lowering FTE?
Lowering the number of FTE,
No, we're not.
nominal, we're probably,
No, we're going to increase it, probably.
no, we're probably looking at lowering the number of enforcement FTE. We're not going to increase. There are probably a couple of people that we're going to move, but we're strategically going to move them. There are also a couple of management that we're going to add. That is correct. But I do know that we did have access and met with the enforcement team multiple times and considered those things.
Okay, so that's basically my assumption that even though the number of enforcement actions may in fact go down. I did not look specifically at enforcement actions. I looked at enforcement cost. If that cost is going to be the same or higher, then enforcement actions, it just means you're spending more cost per action.
Oh, okay, well, anyway, okay.
I see some legal hand raising, so I want to stop. And get behind you is actually one of our legal counsels. I would make sure we get your comment.
Hi, I'm really sorry to interrupt the speaker here. The DCA Budgets Office did prepare a fund condition as of yesterday. I do have copies, and that
Sure.
might help the board.
I would love that.
Yes, no.
I'm actually going to withdraw my question. My point is that
Mr.
there's-
Brownstein is there.
I think the board members should be a part of any financial projection that went on in terms of vetting it, understanding the assumptions before it's used in any
Thank you, it's very
any analysis.
Great. Ma'am, also, Mr. Eds would need one.
Thank you.
Mr. Eds will need one, too.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure you have everything that we
Yeah,
have.
thank you. If you look, I think if that's the same one I'm thinking, if you look down to the very bottom, it will tell you that your fund balance will be depleted by fiscal, well, this is a different one. This says 5.9 months of reserves in 2018-19. The one that we received the other day was negative 3.39 or something like that.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear because we're saying something is different. So this is the one that we just received. It's the analysis of fund condition. And what you're now saying is that you received a different one how many days ago?
2 days ago,
2 days ago.
maybe 3.
there were different projections, so
Yeah.
it seems something may have changed. Is
What
it from
appears-
the same
What
same
what appears
office?
so?
Ma'am, I'm sorry. Noreen, I have to ask you another question, because now we have a discrepancy. Could you tell me whose office this was generated by?
The DCA budget's office.
Okay, and the one you, Mr. Eds, the one you got 2 days ago with different projections was also DCA Budget Office?
Dr. Brown, do you remember who sent us that?
That was Taylor from the
Was it Taylor?
Budget Office.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
2018-19, you're looking at a difference of nearly 6 months from that report to this one.
okay, so this one says prepared 8/25/16. That would be yesterday, and you're saying Wednesday you got a report with different projections?
Well, the one I remember specifically was, from 2 days ago, was that 2018-19 fiscal year. It was a net negative of months available for reserves.
Okay, so this appears to maybe be more recent, done yesterday. Are you comfortable moving on with your presentation?
Well, this is a bit disconcerting. It would suggest to me that the budget office has found some additional revenues or a lowering of cost from 2 days ago. Maybe it would be appropriate if I provided sort of a higher level assessment. I could skip a couple of these slides.
Sure, yeah.
Because I have a suspicion you're not going to make a vote tonight.
Yeah, I don't anticipate one.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Eds, Ms. Norton had a question for you.
Yes.
Just, sometimes it's just the obvious that's right in front of you. The report that you got 2 days ago, was it the combined? Because the two funds have been combined, the VN and the PT?
I believe it was combined.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going on memory here from reading an email, but
Would you like to?
It was combined.
So that, I'm also confused.
Yeah.
That 2 days ago, there was a a deficit, and now it's indicating months in reserve as 5.9 for 18-19. I don't think we'll get our answer today on why such a dramatic difference from the same office in 2
Yep.
days. I don't think we'll get the answer today, so maybe it's best to move forward with the presentation.
to abort the presentation?
Move forward with the
Move forward?
presentation.
Okay. Given that, why don't you turn to slide number 11. Says costs for core business processes, and then there's 4 arrows. Those 4 arrows indicate the cost of enforcement activities, specifically being state and attorney general and other allocated costs, complaint resolution and evaluation, investigations into complaints, and coordinate and manage discipline and probationers. And the column, the bar to the far left, state and AG costs, those are costs you have no control over. They send you a bill, and I believe, if I understand the process correctly, they send you a bill a year after the fact. So they will be sending you a bill for this fiscal year's cost from the Attorney General's office next year, in next fiscal year, which means it's very hard to manage. Most of my clients that I've done this work for find that very, very difficult to budget, to manage, and to account for.
I just want to say that on a current year basis, I agree with you. However, as I had said, I think that if you make strategic decisions that result in you're not using the AG as much, then that you can actually control the cost to some degree. There is some element of control. Isn't that correct, Gina?
That is correct. Although right now, we don't anticipate a decline in our AG costs. We will probably see a bump in the next year as we work those
Right.
older cases through the system.
I agree with that. I agree with
As
that.
those older cases, those legacy backlog cases get pushed through, we're going to see a continued increase in the AG funding.
Right. My comment was, in the long term, it is, I guess my issue is we're saying it's a fixed cost, we can't control it. That's why, I guess that adds some credence to the projection, but I'm saying.
I did not say it's a fixed cost. If I did, I apologize for that. It's a cost that you can't control, meaning the AG's office sends you a bill, and it's based on how much time times an hourly rate that they calculate. And you can't tell your customer, you can't go and go to the AG's office for your complaint to get that taken care of there.
Right. Okay. I'm just saying there's let's say in 5 years, okay, we've fully implemented our changes to our enforcement program, which includes a drastic increase in settlements, cases that are processed much faster and don't go through the AG's office. Correct. And also this notion of we don't have to keep that. So if there is a possibility, I'm just suggesting that the cost could actually go down from the AG. It's a possibility. And my only point in saying this is that there is some control in the long term in terms of the strategy we decide to implement for enforcement, and that's it.
Yeah, sure. I think your point's spot on. Long term, strategically, yes, you probably can. In the near term, I don't think you can. And in fact, the good news for this board is that your cost from the AG's office has actually been rather stable. Most of the other boards and bureaus I've looked at, it's been exponentially increasing annually. I mean, really significant increases.
Mr. Eds, I see some movement behind you from Jonathan. Jonathan, please tell me your last name.
My last name is Burke, B-U-R-K-E. I'm Board and Bureau Relations Manager at DCA.
Mr. Burke, I'm sorry that I repeatedly refer to you as Jonathan. Mr.
problem.
Burke, I see you having some motion in the back, and I saw what I believe was the fund of board. So do you have an update for us?
Yes, I do. I just spoke with Mr. Kadani, the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and through me, he wishes to offer a clarification. The BCP that explained that had the fund conditions being completely depleted in 2018 and 19
Yes.
included BCPs which have not been approved and should not have been made public or released. It was sort of a working document that does not show the reality because those BCPs are still in process.
Let me make sure I understand.
As this was explained to the executive officer and the board president in the calls last evening.
So this that was sent, I mean, what I'm more concerned about what was provided to Mr. Eds, the reason his was different than ours today is because he was provided with one that included BCPs that have not been approved.
Correct.
And then the one you was provided to us today does not include those BCPs that have not been approved.
Yes, BCPs are confidential at this point and have not been approved.
Okay, so yes, my concern was with what Mr. Eds received 2 days ago, because that's what he was basing, some of this presentation on. So I think that we've now clarified why there's a difference. I'm glad that you explained that to us because it was disorienting in a way.
Sure, I can understand how that would be.
Thank you.
Disorienting.
Thank you very much. So now we have an answer. Mr. Eds, does that make sense? Yes?
There's usually a reason.
Okay, yeah.
Madam President?
Yes.
The confidential BCPs are things that we have requested that we want.
Yes.
Right? So even though they're not approved yet, if they are approved, then we will be back at the point of the presentation, correct?
So my understanding is, please, Mr. Burke, or Dr. Brown, Mr. Ed, someone, correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to misspeak. My understanding is the BCPs we have put in and requested, they are things that we do want, and they are waiting to be signed by Director Kadani. Correct or incorrect?
I can't speak to where
Okay.
they are in whatever
No.
their process is, but the fact of the matter is, at this stage in the process, they are confidential and have not been approved, and therefore, whatever impact that they may have upon approval on your budget, this cannot be factored into any kind of future planning, and that's why there's a corrected, accurate, as
I
of right
see.
now, fund condition being provided.
But there is a chance that they could still be approved. They just have not been yet. And there's a chance they could be denied. Both, right?
I'm really not sure.
But to your point, Donna, which is the things that we are looking for, which may impact money, are things like the telephone, expanding our nurse education division. So we are not, and I think this also goes nicely with what we were talking about earlier today in terms of the EO salary. That actually has nothing to do with what we are expanding our budget for. We're expanding our budget for things that we haven't had in decades, right? The things that really are getting your craw, which are, again, getting a telephone. You guys have seen our telephones, and you guys have tried to call in, and then again, expanding our education division. Those really were the big things that we put in, and those are the things that, that whether we have 2 more years left in funding or 3 more years, those are the things that we put in, and thus the things that Mr. Eds based his estimate off. Does that help a little bit?
Oh, yes, and so I guess these were not frivolous BCPs that we put in. We really need these things, we want these things.
That is correct. So then, and I'll just go over them again, because I know I put them in my report. I put in for things like our telephone expansion, the nurse education, facility space, because we are outgrowing, and then enhancement, I'm sorry, I'm looking, and then that's for our digital, because we have so much paper.
Okay, great. So now we have an answer to the mystery.
Very good. All right, let me ask you to flip forward to slide 14. Earlier this afternoon, I heard a lot of discussion about the educational consultants, and based on the additional resources that has been requested or being requested or in the process of being requested, the additional resources or the total cost for the educational consulting as a process or as a work activity is almost $6.5 million. There is no dedicated funding source for educational consulting with regard to a specific fee. So those costs either have to be incorporated into the fees that you're charging for individuals for licenses, or a separate fee schedule or a restructuring of the fee schedule to include cost or to include fees for the institutions is the other option. So in working with staff and talking with staff, we thought it would be best to set up a fee schedule for the institutions so that those costs would not be borne by the individuals, and that clearly is a policy decision. But we decided to make this as an option because it seemed reasonable to have individuals pay for their cost and the institutions pay for their cost. Any question about that, just as a general observation?
Mr. Vertito, indicating a question.
No, I regret to, no, sir, I agree with what you said about the schools paying their cost. I just want to point out it's 6:15,
Yes.
and a lot of the flights are coming up that in order to get through security and get to the airport, I'm going to have to strongly suggest, Madam President, that we may have to table the meeting to get everybody out of here by 6:30 to make traffic and shuttles and everything else.
And I do want to let you know that if you need to leave, there's not a motion on this item, and that we would still have quorum. So if Mr.
No,
Vertito, you need
I'm
to-
looking for my colleagues that have to catch flights and the staff. That's the later, that's for the 9 o'clock flight.
So yes, in the past, we have board members to leave if they have flights to catch, and all we need to maintain is quorum. I see that we're close to the end of your report, so let's see if we can get through it.
Well, actually, the only other thing that I would point out would be on page 18. And it is an example of one of the new fees that we've calculated. Initial approval to operate a nursing and/or psych tech program. See on the right-hand side, the purple bar that says $15,000. That is the cost that we have, and the breakdown of those costs is $4,800 to actually do the work itself. We've got $8,800 of incoming support costs at a divisional level, as well as a department level, as well as a state level, and then the rebuilding of reserves, which may or may not be appropriate at this point, of $1,368. So I have done similar kinds of analysis on similar kinds of fee activities. One I did about a year ago, the same kind of review and approval for an educational program was like $50,000, and another one for a very similar organization as yours was like $10,000. So the number of $15,000, as I look at it, is quite reasonable comparison to other clients that I've had. So with that, I will conclude my remarks.
Thank you. Is there any follow-up questions, Mr. Dabrowski?
On page 14 of the smaller report, where you're talking about establishing the fees for educational institutions, are you able to attach a dollar amount that you think would be appropriate, or do you have some other means of, attaching?
I'm sorry. I thought you were going one place with your question, then ask me that again, please.
Oh, I'd like to hear which way you thought I was going. Hear the answer to that.
Well, I thought you were asking if we actually had looked at individual fee services, individual fee calculations.
Okay. So basically, it looks like you're saying, yes, it is appropriate to charge the institutions.
Sure.
Are you able to say, by my analysis, I think this is the dollar amount that is fair or justifiable?
Well, if you look back here,
oh, that's the fine print.
the fine print. If you look on, it starts on page 104 of the index, or the appendix. Down at the bottom it says educational provider key fee categories. And then it continues on to the next page as well.
Mr. Dabrowski, did that answer your question?
Guy,
It's like $15,000 instead of $10,000.
Okay.
Can I
Now
ask
I
a
have my
question?
answer.
Okay.
Ms. Avella?
So there's one thing to consider in terms of increasing existing fees, licensing fees, but you're talking about instituting a new fee for review of new school applications. Okay, what is the justification for that fee?
What
And
specific?
what is the justification for that fee, and what was your analysis in deciding to propose that fee? I mean, raising other fees that are in existence is one thing, one way to generate revenue if there's a need. But what was your analysis that you went through in terms of determining why we should charge schools fees for new school applications?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and Cheryl, you could step in if you'd like. The cost for looking at the approval process is significant. If my memory serves, for looking at a new school, new educational program, there's roughly 60 hours of just staff time of basically the educational consultant's time to actually do that work. So 60 hours worth of cost of time, that sounds like a fairly significant amount of work. Why wouldn't you why wouldn't you establish a fee to do that?
Okay, well, I mean, the board does a lot of work that it doesn't charge fees for. I mean, we do school site visits. Those are significant. There's a lot of work that the board does. Gina's enforcement group, the only cost recovery comes from the AG's fees. So should we charge a fee for desk investigations? I mean, there's a lot of hard work that goes into that. I mean, so I guess what I'm asking you is how do you evaluate which of these services has value? And I mean, they all have value, but
Sure.
Which one gets a fee and which doesn't?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And a lot of times it comes down to, in doing the analysis, can you put a specific amount of time on a unit basis? And a lot of times you can't. I mean, it could, it's a little bit, it's a whole lot. You can make your fee schedule really complex, and you could say on an investigation, for example, you could say it's a little investigation, a big investigation, it's a middle-sized investigation, it's a huge investigation. How do you define that? It really can become very difficult. And so with respect to enforcement activities, it just seems more reasonable to allocate that cost on a unit basis. Now, with regard to education and their review of specific educational programs, we could look at how much time that takes, and we can come up with a pretty narrow average of what it takes to review and do the analysis to approve a new educational program.
And I would also just want to remind board members that we have had extensive discussion in the past, even since the last sunset, about for the possibility of charging schools for major curriculum revisions or initial review of curriculum. So I know that's a couple of these categories, but not all of them.
Right, but I guess my point is, yes, the board has discussed that. I was looking for his independent assessment of what he feels about that, and it appears it's exactly the same as the board. So
I could assure you I did not ask this board about prior conversations.
Oh, yes.
It's really looking at, speaking with the people doing the work and saying, okay, you're doing a lot of work, why is there no fees? How do we reasonably structure that fees? So we don't make a fee schedule that just becomes obscenely complex. But at the same time is reflective of their work effort, and that we can align an amount of work effort on a unit basis. So it's really an analysis from the ground up of what makes sense in terms of how to structure these fees.
Right, well, just addressing what Samantha said is that I think we originally started talking about charging new school applications fee is when we were really grappling with this backlog of new schools that we had waiting in the queue. We had 150 schools and a moratorium, so that was a real issue for us. But to me, that's a workload issue, right? That's a resource constraint issue. It's not a funding issue. So you can't really fix a resource or workload issue with a fee, per se. And I know that we have I asked John Brooks to go talk to the BRN, who charges a fee for applications, and asked him, and he discussed it with them, and they said that it didn't have any impact on workload or backlog. So I'm just saying that it can't be used, and it shouldn't be used to address a workload issue.
Right, I see the difference. Mr. Vertito, I believe you had a question. I did not forget about you.
Yes, Madam President, just to let you know a little bit of background. Because of the cost for the investigator from the AG's office, this board moved forward to form our own investigative service.
Yes.
And that was a cost containment issue to try to corral that expense, because it was getting rather expensive. The other aspect of it, it was the schools themselves that offered to pay, that brought the idea forth of
offering to pay a school fee for curriculum review, for major and minor changes. And that's where the idea of charging the schools came forward, because our NECs, being master's prepared nurses, we're doing a lot of curriculum review and changes. So that's where that fee came in, is to help offset the cost and hopefully hire some more NECs and use that money to help offset some of the costs of our NECs. So those are some of the background for these cost factors and fees.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Vertito. Ms. Norton?
Was just echoing what John said. I mean, we've had discussions related to this before. And then we've also taken into consideration that the fee schedules that our licensees currently pay are already high.
Yes.
And to raise them more when we have another resource. Not that I think that the schools should unduly pay, but the schools, they do use a lot of the resources, and from their own words, they would be willing to do the initial to make up for it. So I think we do have to keep in mind that we must do something. We've put different things in place. We combined the funds so that the PT fund would be solvable. And now we have a situation where we have to do something, or we will, if we get the BCPs that we want, and the board has to grow. We're going to have to do something, and this seems to be a reasonable solution to this problem, although it certainly does require more discussion.
Correct. And I would like to point out that our NECs are leaving to catch their flights. There's no further education.
Pretty soon.
If there is a board member that it does need to leave to catch a flight, I just want to let you know, feel free to do so. You're not held hostage.
We did change our flights from 7 to 9, but we're being told now that to make the 9 o'clock flight, you have to get there because the lines are outrageous.
So yes, if you feel free.
I'll wait a few more minutes.
Okay. So Mr. Eds, I believe where we left off, you were finished with your presentation and we are taking board member comment. Any other board member questions or comments? The only one other thing that we may or may not take up today, I believe by the conversation of Ms. Norton, we might not do it today, is there is a possibility for the board to vote on if we want to accept any of these fees. But there have been concerns that there's more discussion that needs to be done. There is concern from Isabella that she needed more of more information. There's been a request for more discussion, so I'm not sure at this time that we're ready to do that. I see legal.
You would also not legally be capable because it wasn't agendized, so I think we can leave it at that.
Well, then, that settles that.
Well, in other words, the report was agendized, but not the actual actions of taking those kinds of policy calls.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Thanks for telling me. It's been a weird day. Okay. Any further discussions by the board? At this time, I don't feel we're ready to make any motions, so I don't think we're even going to put that forward. Mr. Eds, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for remaining with us and taking questions from the board members.
I'll see you in November, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. This leads us to item 21, review and adopt May 12 through 13, 2016 and June 20, 2016 board meeting minutes. You guys, all board members have received the minutes, yes?
Yes.
And are there any questions by board members at this time?
There are corrections.
Yes, Ms. Norton.
So regarding, and I don't have them in any particular order, but regarding the June 20th board meeting minutes, the attendance is incorrect, because I was not at that meeting, but I'm not listed as being absent, and there were people at the meeting that are listed as being absent. So those should be looked at. And then regarding the minutes from the, I believe it was the May meeting, on page 38, there's a comment that says, it's listed under the adoption of the November and February board meeting minutes. There's a bullet that says, Ms. Norton commented she makes her vacation schedule a year in advance. That was not regarding the meeting minutes. That comment was regarding the changing of the dates for this meeting. So that actually needs to be moved to page 23.
Okay.
Let's see. And then, there were corrections to the minutes sent out. And it's just a request that if corrections to the minutes are sent out and new pages are sent, if they could highlight what the corrections were, because I read through them and I didn't see any differences between what was included in the packet and what was sent out later.
Do you have further corrections, Ms. Norton?
And just one more.
Okay, yes, please.
In the minutes, it was also noted by Mr. Bronstein asked for cost recovery to be placed on today's agenda, and it was not placed on today's agenda. So that's all the corrections.
Thank you. And we have those noted. Do board members have further questions or comments about the minutes?
If I may?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Or Mr. Brown?
No, I was only going to say that I believe by it being missed on this agenda, that it would fall on the next agenda, so I didn't feel the need to bring it up further.
Thank you.
If I may, in terms of the actual minutes, there are a few clarifications that need to be made, and for example, most pertinently, we need to note May 12th, the minutes from that date, and another closed session that occurred on May 13th. So I would suggest maybe tabling this item and allow for corrections and to be brought back to you, if that's acceptable.
I see no, any board members strongly opposed to that? This is bringing the minutes back to the November meeting?
I'll move to table agenda item 21 until the next meeting.
Sure, I'll
Allow for
second
the
that.
corrections to be made.
I'll second.
Yeah, we have 3 seconds. We have a 5th. Any public comment on the minutes? No? Okay. I'll take a roll call vote, starting with Ms. Norton.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, wow, we're fast.
Yes.
Mendoza. Vice President Moreno.
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Mr. de Bronstein.
Yes?
Ms. Avella.
Yes.
Mr. Deerking.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, that moves us to Executive Officer's Report. I would like to go back for a second. I'm feeling hesitant. I don't want to move forward without legal clarification. I'm a little nervous now. It was advised to us by legal counsel that even though maybe we weren't ready, we also were not legally, it was not legally allowed to take a vote on item 20, the fee audit report. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then, so we have other items agendized that we did vote on, and we didn't specifically state that there would be a vote. Is that the concern that?
Yes, no, in other words,
I'm sorry.
so your agenda outlines a fee audit report. It doesn't suggest different policy items that would be voted on. It doesn't discuss what recommendations would be made.
Okay, thank you for updating me. I didn't know that was needed for a, I'm just confused. Maybe we need to-
So in other words, whatever action you were proposing to take, that action would need to be on the agenda, if that helps.
Madam President, if I may, normally a report is usually received by the board as an informational item.
Yeah.
The correct language might include and possible action regarding fee license increases.
I got you now. So we get it, right in the future. Is Mr. Deerking suggesting correct?
That would absolutely help. Yeah, thank you.
So if we want to take an action vote, then it would need to be.
Yeah, and if, in the interest of time at this point, I would make a couple suggestions. One is, obviously, we can do a lot of fine-tuning on agendizing items to make it clear, to facilitate the board, to allow the board to take the action it intends to take. Obviously, we could do that at a later time. And then with the other items that are remaining, we might want to prioritize in terms of what the board would like to accomplish today.
Sure. So item 21 has been tabled to the November meeting. At this time, we move on to agenda item 22, which is Executive Officer's Report. If all will remember, this morning we took C portion of this report earlier, so we will now be getting our Executive Officer's Report minus Section C.
Thank you, and I will try to be brief, and because I appreciate you guys went through the materials, and then you let me know which areas you feel you need deeper review. I just want to go over A, and this is, if everyone remembers, we are now in sunset, and so I provided you guys with this is a sample timeline. There are a couple of dates there that we already need to change, but the biggest thing that I actually, and perhaps it's not agendized correctly either, I wanted to ask before the board is to consider that we would need to have an October meeting date. And so I would want to, if it's possible, to ask the board to consider having an October meeting date. The second thing is that we would need to have a ad hoc sunset subcommittee. And so the reason for this committee is that then they would be reviewing draft iterations as they come before, as we start preparing them, with the understanding that the full sunset document would come before the board in October. The reason for that is that we have to submit that in November so that it can go then to the legislature. I'm trying to be very timely because those materials do have to then go and be packaged. And if we were to wait until our November board meeting, number one, it could be quite long, and number two, getting it to print materials, we run the risk that that information, we would be well into the holidays, and so I wanted to make sure I capture you. With that, the October meeting would be very similar to what we had before, where it would be a WebEx, meaning that you guys would just need to be in a public facility or in the Sacramento office. And so I just wanted to now have us consider an October date, because then that would afford us the ability to get all the materials that we needed to get in, get the reports from fiscal, and get it off to the print in time to meet the November deadline and get it submitted into, get it to the assembly as it needs to by November.
And the date, I believe the suggested date that's listed is incorrect.
And we would also need to, that is correct, it would be actually that Wednesday, the October 19th. And then we would also need to approve the ad hoc subcommittee to review the different drafts that would then go before the full board and the full document to review.
Is there any questions from board members on the executive officer's report? Mr. DeBronski?
Speaking to the proposed October board meeting, would we possibly want to consider just doing a single full-day meeting and maybe taking some agenda items that would typically show up in November that could be successfully handled in October and just make it an all-day meeting?
Sure.
I would rather spend one day in October to make for a lighter
So
November.
the date on the table right now is Wednesday, October 19th. I want to make sure that all board members clearly understand that. The
Clarification.
Yes, Dr. Basti Martinez.
Thank you. If the recommendation is an all-day meeting, that sounds like a face-to-face versus a web meeting.
That's exactly what I was trying to articulate, is that generally we have had partial day web teleconferences, but we've never had a full-day teleconference. Mr. DeBronstein, was your intention that it be a full-day in-person meeting or a full-day teleconference?
Full day in person, I would pick Sacramento as probably the easiest location.
Okay,
And I'm just throwing it out there, just.
Sure.
And just to ease off what might show up in November.
sure, yeah, because we've talked about putting several things on the agenda for November. Rebecca, do we need to make a motion on this?
Can I,
Yes,
are we
Mr.
still
Bell.
just me individually, I would prefer to have a WebEx teleconference. I mean, it's very hard to, attend all-day meetings, and we really had an increased number of meetings from my perspective, and it's very hard to make time to do all of that. So it would certainly be easier for me, in consideration of people's schedules and jobs and lives. I would prefer a teleconference WebEx.
Any comments on my left about the teleconference, all-day teleconference? It's the first time we've ever brought it up, so I just want to get a comment, yes?
I'm open to either, but with the caveat that I will have to check with my employer, so, and I'm going to have to leave at this point, so I will.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Norton. Any,
Personally,
yeah,
for me,
Ms. Mendoza?
if we're going to do an all-day teleconference, I don't care for the teleconference because I really can't hear what's being said over the conference call at all.
So the WebEx would allow you to do both the camera and the web, so it wouldn't just be phone?
No, we did that.
Oh,
the
you
last
still weren't
one,
able to-
And the
okay.
only thing we could do was the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know we were talking about
That's
all
the
day. I guess I have a concern with the all-day aspect as well. So,
That was my concern, is we've used teleconferences for partial day meetings or short meetings, but all day might pose some challenges to us. I think we have a couple items that we're talking about. One is having the meeting at all on October 19th, which is the sunset timeline will pretty much require it. And then I think after we decide if we want to meet on that day, I think then we can decide in what format. Is that acceptable?
What's the intended action?
To schedule a meeting for Wednesday, October 19th, agenda to be determined, and a format to be determined.
Sure.
well, to me, how long the meeting is depends on whether or not I would vote yes
no.
for the meeting.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. To schedule a full-day meeting
Okay.
on October 19th, with the agenda to be determined, and format to be determined with a strong leaning, I believe, right now to in-person on the full-day meeting. Do we need to, if we're going to meet, do we need to vote on that or that?
No, I think if your intention is clear to staff at this point, I would say you're fine.
Okay. I do want to,
Unless, again, if the intention of the board is not clear and you'd like to make a motion or make a clear vote.
Dr. Baste Martinez, I see your, I want to get your,
Okay. I just want to make sure we all are understanding.
yes,
If I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes.
An all-day meeting would become a face-to-face meeting, potentially.
potentially.
And versus the potential or the possibility that the November meeting may move from 2 to 3 days.
We hadn't discussed that all. Okay, let me back up. I think I know where the problem is. We hadn't
The reason
discussed.
I'm asking,
Yeah.
or I'm just trying to get a sense,
Right.
there is a cost
Correct,
to the board to have us travel.
correct,
And it's not only that, we are asking staff to change their schedules
correct.
to staff us in other ways. Additionally, it is a public meeting,
Yes, for sure.
and we want to make sure all of the public can get to the public meeting?
Correct.
If they want to?
So what, I think this will help explain. The original discussion was in the executive officer's report. We're going into sunset again. We're going under sunset review again, and it will be in March. We have a very strict and specific timeline of when things are due for the sunset oversight. So we have to draft a report to publication. We have to draft a sunset report to publication, and it's due before, it's due, if we discuss the draft at our November 3 to 4 meeting, it will be too late. So the suggestion was brought up that we need to have a meeting in October, and initially, it would be a teleconference for a short period of time to only discuss the sunset overview, the draft report. Then it was suggested by Mr. de Brownstein that, well, if we're going to meet, why don't we meet all day? And that's when we got into teleconference face-to-face. So the initial intent is that we have a very hard deadline in mid-November for a draft report to go to publication. If we delay reviewing that by the full board until our November 3 to 4 meeting, we will not have time to get it to publication.
I don't think I was suggesting that, ma'am. I'm sorry for the confusion.
So maybe we should just back up and say, we need to, for the sunset draft report, we need to have a meeting in October. The date that has been put forth is Wednesday, October 19th. The original intent is a short teleconference.
Time?
Total time or time of day?
Time of day, please.
Time of day is usually we do usually we do morning 9 to 11.
I'm wondering if we can get a show of hands to see who is available. I know
Sure.
that being a full day for me on that day, it may be challenging, but if there's going to be a quorum, then
Sure.
I don't have to request a change of date.
Exactly.
So is there just a straw?
Let's
poll to
just
who's
take
available?
a quick show of hands because I'm not getting a lot of response from people. Who's available for a partial day teleconference? Partial day teleconference on Wednesday, October 19th. Proposed time is 9 to 11.
I have to check with my employer.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 and 2 maybes. One from Mr. Vertito and one from Ms. Norton. If the 6 that raised their hands are making that commitment, we do have quorum. So that seems to be acceptable at this time. We also have a board member missing. Do we need to make an official motion to meet on that day?
No, if your staff is clear on your intention, that's not necessary.
So it looks like what people are most available for is a partial day teleconference, which was the original intent of the draft report. Yes? Yes? Okay. So let's move forward with that because that looked like most people are available for. Any other questions for Dr. Brown on the executive officer's report? Okay, I don't see any, and there is no motion required on this agenda item. That leads us to agenda item number 23, Enforcement Committee Report. That is by our Enforcement Committee, Board Member Ms. Zavella and Vice President Moreno. I'm not sure which or both of you are presenting the report.
Well, I just want to say I don't need to present anything. I'm sure people have read it, and I'm fine as long as Andrew is to proceed.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes, I concur with our chair of the Enforcement Committee, Avella.
So we've received your report and read it. Do board members have any questions for the Enforcement Committee on the report? No. Are there any comments from the public on the committee report? Nope. Any further discussion by the board? A motion is not required to accept the report. Okay, I see no further questions. I would like to thank the Enforcement Committee on their report and their work on the committee. 24A1, discussion and possible action on legislation and regulations affecting the board. This is about our 2016 legislation, and I do want to give one quick update because there was some updates that came through last night and this morning from the Capitol and from Sacramento, that one of the bills, Senate Bill 1194, which may have generated board member comment, has been pulled, is the language I received, from consideration to seek additional stakeholder discussion and comment. I believe this means the bill will not be moving forward this year, correct? Is anyone going to verify that for me? Yes? Okay, so so 1194, just to go on the record, is not moving forward, so we might not have comments on that. Dr. Brown, would you like to present the 2016 legislation report? I don't know if also our Ledge Committee will be chiming in, or who's going to be there?
Okay, so the Ledge Committee met via basically email, gave some input on the bills, and I don't think we really changed our opinions from what they were at our last quarterly board meeting.
Okay.
My concern with SB 1194, sorry, is that this bill has gone from one iteration to another. It's been pulled, it's been placed, and everybody's watching it. I would like to express an opinion as to what it is today, but then when it changes tomorrow, the opinion's not valid.
I know that I believe it's the end of the legislative session at this time, and I believe that's why things are moving fast currently. Maybe you could add some clarification.
They go off session August 30th.
August 30th, okay.
They go on break.
But I hear your concern that the Ledge Committee works to form an opinion and then it's changed.
Right, and I would ask maybe some latitude with the board to approve or to allow the Ledge Committee to meet, should it be pertinent, and place an opinion for the president's signature. But that's huge, and we don't even know where this bill is going to go.
Right.
So I kind of want to put it back on the full board to say, no, we're good where it's at right now being pulled, or we want to give the Ledge Committee an opportunity to review it should it come back to life.
Right now, I believe it's not moving forward. The session ends August 30th, and from what I understand, it's not moving forward at all. Would someone like to educate me on when the session reconvenes?
I believe it's a month.
A month? So August 30th, September 30th, October 1st, something like that. Mr. DeBrownstein, I just want to make clear, I want to understand you. You're asking the full board to weigh in on whether to address SB 1194 in the full board meeting, or to allow Ledge Committee to make a recommendation? Help me.
Should 1194 reappear before we meet again as a full board, that today the board delegate the review of that bill and opinion as to what action the full board would take to the Ledge Committee to be written up, and then it would go for the president's signature to be presented.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, the Ledge Committee would make the opinion, but then my name would be on the letter.
I'll sign my name to it if you want.
Well, here's my concern. I'll just put this out there. SB 1194 is has generated a lot of stakeholder comments and a lot of stakeholder feedback. It directly affects DCA boards, and there are strong opinions on both sides. There are strong opinions on both sides of 1194 and all of its iterations. It is also a very politically charged bill, I think more so than any other one that we've been reviewing. Also, the author of SB 1194 is Senator Hill, appropriately, who is the chair of the BNP committee, which the board is also affiliated with. We fall under the review and authority of the BNP committee. So my personal concern is that because of the sensitivity and the high profile of 1194, and letter would be or have my name on it, I would prefer full board input, because personally, I have some strong opinions about 1194, and I don't know at this time if they agree or disagree with the Ledge Committee. And if we were all to meet, if I were to join you on the Ledge Committee, we would have to have an open meeting, and I'm not sure there's time for that. There's time for that, yeah.
Madam President,
Yes.
perhaps we can closely follow the bill's progress, and then should something occur, we'll
Yes, I would.
notify you.
That's one thing, is that I really do need to rely, all of us need to rely on our Ledge Committee, a very capable Ledge Committee, may I just say, to follow this and also put eyes of expertise upon it and advise the board, because as Mr. DeBronstein said, there's many and rapid changes to 1194 that may be hard for myself to keep up with, but I have full confidence in the skills of Mr. DeBronstein and Mr. Durking, that they could more efficiently follow it and provide feedback than I could myself. So my desire, my hope would be that the Ledge Committee could follow this very closely as far as making an official opinion that would then go out on letterhead on behalf of the full board. With most bills, I would say no problem, but this one is a particular sensitivity. That's what gives me a concern.
Okay, then it might be something that we discuss in October.
Yes, maybe. Yes, and I don't know where the Ledge will be in session by that time, that sort of thing. So I thank you for allowing me to express my concerns on this. So I don't believe there's any, Dr. Brown, do you have anything more on the Ledge report?
Or do you want to know June number 2?
I'm sorry.
I need action on that.
Yes. That would lead us now to 24A2. If there's any further discussion by the board members at this time? Okay, thank you. 24A2, discussion and possible action to repeal BNP Code Section 2873 VN and 4551C3 PT, qualification of licensure based on equivalent education and or work experience. I would just like the board members to be aware that this equivalent education and or work experience licensure qualification is also commonly and frequently referred to as Method 3, which you may have heard before. Yes, Ms. Avella, I see you.
So we're not talking about Method 4, just Method 3. Method 4 is a military service exemption.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, that's,
Well, you're saying that, I mean, this basically says that you've got to be a VN program grad to have
So-
an LVN?
sure, and I'll give some background. I feel,
Well, I mean, we can proceed. I got it. I mean, unless you want to.
We are simply, we're presenting this for the board to seek, to get your approval, to seek an author to go forward with repealing this particular one, which is simply those that come forth and before us seeking licensure for work experience For those that come from the military, they come out of the military and actually have equivalent coursework experience. And so those actually, then, they come with coursework experience, and we actually utilize that on their application. So those are not the same. These specific individuals at times will, the issue we have here is that there's, that you have in your packet as well, we're looking at, will sometimes have documented that they have been working as a CNA, or they have gone, there are some schools that are actually setting up under what they refer to as a method 3, and then having these students then pay to actually work, and then they're signing documentation. Most recently, we had an actual criminal fraud related to this, where applicants were actually having fraudulent documentation related, and no theoretical or clinical practice was happening. And so that's really what we're seeking in regards to this.
Okay.
So I just want to clarify with you, Dr. Brown, because I'm also very sensitive to the needs of our veterans and our military, that the changes proposed to 2873 VN and 4511 C3 PT would not have no effect on the way military are processed for VN or PT licensure.
No.
That's fine. Okay, so are you going to present this, Dr. Brown? Are you going to make a presentation, or do you just ask questions?
Oh, I thought I was just going to be quick, so if
Oh,
you guys
yeah.
want me to- I'm sorry.
So there's, I'm sorry if I can get there. There's a report that we have, and we've received it and reviewed your report, Dr. Brown. The board members have any questions regarding Dr. Brown's report?
I do, but
Yeah.
are you going to, so you're just going to proceed to questions? You're not
Yeah,
going to?
unless you, just for time, if you want me to. Just
Yeah, I definitely have some questions.
Fantastic.
Okay, I have some specific questions, and then I have a overall question. So I had emailed to you about my concern about the last paragraph before the recommendation.
Yes. And so.
Okay, so what?
I asked Cheryl to chime in on that specific one, because we did have clarification on that language. Cheryl, if you want to jump in on that one, we did talk briefly about that one.
Do you want me to state my question, or?
It's on page 3, if I'm not mistaken. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Do you want me to state my question, or?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. Well, I have to read it, so it says, further, of the total candidate population passing the VN licensure examination, NCLEX, PN, or PT licensure examination capital, approximately 80% are program graduates. The remaining 20% are equivalency candidates. So the way I read that, and just to confirm, is of 100 people walking out of the test and passing, 80 are program grads and 20 are equivalency candidates, right?
Approximately.
Okay, so that doesn't speak to pass rates, right? I mean, that's not, I mean, we know we don't have an 80% pass rate, right? So that's not a statement about pass rates, that's just classifying the population, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then when you go on, it says, as such, only 20% of the total candidates passing VN or PT licensure examinations are able to demonstrate possession of a minimum level of competence required for the delivery of safe and competent care, so on and so forth. I don't understand the connection between those two sentences.
Well, first of all, the information that has been presented to the board, not only in this report, but the last few reports, few quarters. If you recall, we have been discussing the pass rate for both exams. As a rule, roughly 20 to 25% of the candidates fail any exam, any licensure examination. Now, perhaps the problem I think you're saying is you're thinking the 20% relates to the 20% of the candidates who are testing that are equivalency.
Are you saying that only 20, not that I actually think it matters to the analysis, but are you saying that 20% of equivalency candidates, only 20% pass?
Roughly.
But
20 to 25% of the equivalency candidates pass, and that's over
Okay,
over a
that's
period of
fine
time.
if that's a fact, but that doesn't follow this sentence.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So it's two separate thoughts, right? But I just
Sure.
want to confirm, you're saying that 20% of equivalency candidates pass?
Yes.
Okay, okay, I just wanted to know that. Okay. Okay. I guess my thought here is, when I read this, and it seemed like a pretty significant proposal, right? We're going to seek repeal of the Method 3 option, right? I mean, basically, we're saying if you're not a program grad, other than the military exemption, you can't get a VN license. Okay, so, I mean, we've been doing this for many years, right? And, I mean, this is going to affect thousands and thousands of people, correct?
I don't think, no.
No?
It's not thousands, but it will affect. So
it's,
go ahead.
I'm saying, just to complete my thought, so it's going to affect people. It's going to affect people who want to go through this pathway. So my thought is that, I guess I was surprised that we're going to possibly vote on that tonight, since this is the first I've actually heard about it. I just want to make sure I fully understand and I have the support for it. I want to say I'm not against it. I'm glad the schools aren't here now, because I'm sure they have a lot of public comment about this and would want us to go forward. So I just want to make sure we have strong basis to do this. So we're basically saying that we have real concerns that these type of people are not qualified or to do it. That's what we're saying. Mm-hmm. Okay, so is there, one of the things I think would be very helpful and we'd give support is, if we could find out, or if we have statistics on enforcement cases relative to these candidates. Are we finding that Method 3 people have a disproportionate number of disciplinary actions? What are the nature of those actions? I mean, because for me, I mean, don't we need to have proof that these people actually don't practice safely?
So here's the interesting thing about Method 3. So when they were in, so now that they're in, there are two things that have happened. And so that's the reason why I cited the case that now about them, because Method 3 is actually caught at the evaluation set, not at the enforcement time, because that's where we actually see the deficiency. The other piece of this is that both in ATS and CAS, as well as in Breeze, there was no demarcation of what they were because they didn't have a school code, right? Because they didn't go to school. So there's no way to actually, so now they're licensed.
Yes.
In enforcement, there's no way to actually then data mine for them because they don't have a school code. So the best way to catch them is we catch them actually for their deficiencies, and we actually do further. Most of the time when we catch these folks is actually looking at, when we ask for more information on the evaluation licensing side, when we're actually seeing fraudulent documents. And one of the most significant ways that we've caught them has been that we've seen that the person that has said that they were the person that witnessed their clinical hours was also the same person that was actually the administrator of the program, and those two weren't the same. Or we saw conflicting dates of their time, and then we probed further and we found out this person was the actual administrator of the school and also was the benefactor of the program. And so that's actually how we uncovered one of the bigger ones that ended up being a criminal fraud case. But because they don't have a school code, we cannot data mine, and so we wouldn't be able to see it on the enforcement side through ATS, CAS, or Breeze. And so that's the struggle there, and so you wouldn't get that on the backside. The licensing side is where we've been catching most of these and documenting, and that just is actually coming from seeing the deficiencies in their actual work experience and in the documented hours.
Madam President.
Is that, so you don't think that so there's no way to really do an enforcement study on these people in that regard?
No, there wouldn't be. We would have to manually pull their license file. We'd have to look through discipline, match it with a license file to see if they were an equivalency candidate. But as Dr. Brown was saying, these are applicants that are affected. They don't make it to the enforcement side because they've lost their hours accrued.
No, this is what we discussed yesterday. I guess I had a different, idea of what we had said, because I'm not talking about applicants. I'm talking about after these people get their license, okay? We want to really see, did they practice safely? So
Right.
I'm talking about people who are already licensed, and is there a way of going back and tagging them and doing studies on, if you found out that out of 100 Method 3 candidates, 90 of them had disciplinary actions, that's highly significant, right? So I'd feel better about saying, hey, these people aren't qualified. You see what I'm saying? Are we saying there's no way to do that?
Not at this time. We would not, we would have to do it manually. We would have to pull their application file from the State Records Center and then pull enforcement files to match those up to make that determination.
Okay, 'cause, I walked away with a different impression yesterday than when we talked about.
And that's because I'm not familiar with the evaluation side. I'm
Okay.
familiar with the enforcement side. How they're
Okay.
coding things in ATS, pre-breeze, is on the evaluation side, not on the enforcement side.
Okay, so I guess we're saying that's just not an option.
We literally, there's literally boxes that we actually, for this particular case I was referring to, that they're coded as 92, and we actually had to go and manually pull them, drive over to the actual secure place and actually pull them. Like, that's how archaic it is. So it is one of those, but yeah, it does fall on the licensing side.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand the basis of why we're saying these people aren't qualified.
I can also attest to that a little bit.
Uh-huh.
One of the concerns that goes along with this is that when some investigation was done, some fraud was found out, was being done, and then it was investigated further. It was the tip of the iceberg, and we found rampant fraud with the Method 3 candidates, and even had to go back to some people that had been fraudulently applied and then licensed, and actually go back. So there was actually cases of some rampant fraud going on with Method 3, and then some research was done and found no other state has something such as this, and it's being highly abused, and there was
Madam President.
wondering that, trying to see if there was a need for it. Mr. Vertito?
I just want to point out, I've dealt with Method 3 students. Being the teacher, I have encountered numerous Method 3. In fact, I've taught classes that help them meet the pediatrics and obstetrics units required for them to sit for the board. In my time approaching students with this challenge method, I found them that they don't have the critical thinking or the basic skills. Many of them are CNAs trying to circumvent the actual school process. Therefore, they lack the critical thinking, medical surgical skills, the nursing care planning skills, all the necessary skills of an LVN. Further, many of them circumvent the clinical skills. They get a friend who's an LVN or who's an RN, says, I've done trach, I've done wound care, I've done this, and the fraud is rampant. They get them to sign it off without actually execution. Most of the facilities will let them watch, but will not let them perform the skills, especially asepsis. Because they don't have the skills, they have a high tendency to violate surgical sterility and introduce major infections to the population, which puts the patient at risk. I hardly endorse this because I agree with both our EO and our president. There has been rampant abuse of this loophole to get one of our licenses. And if we aspire to have the best nurses in the nation, loopholes like this need to be closed.
Okay, I have some comments. As far as the abuse of the system, we're not talking about, okay, as far as the abuse of the system, we're talking about people have apparently manipulated and abused the application process to get the license via the equivalency option, right? That's what we're talking about? Okay, but how does that speak to the actual, just cut to the chase, just because some people are abusing the system, does that mean that you throw out the system? I mean, is that like throwing the baby out with the bathwater? I mean, does that mean that nobody's qualified to do it just because, don't we have to fix the system of people applying or consider fixing that system rather than take out the whole option altogether?
Well, one of the, there's there's a few answers to that. One is that one of the considerations was that we do not actually have that many applicants that apply, that it wasn't being highly utilized. The ones that do utilize it, the pass rates are very low, coupled with the fraud and the abuse and the thought that this was something that was a program that was introduced a long time ago, and maybe it was time to reevaluate it to see if it was still needed, if it was being used frequently and properly, and just the standard of this is something unique that was brought to California and not used elsewhere. I think it's just a reexamination of this equivalency method to determine, do we still need it, or are there other ways? The healthcare education has changed in the past however many decades since this was introduced, and do we still need this method? And there are also new things, new methods coming out that we discussed in strategic planning apprenticeships, or not that they're directly one-for-one. So I think that what we're trying to do here is to review this method and see if it's still viable or necessary. Yes?
If it's something that the board would like additional information, clear, accurate statistics, more information of any kind, more discussion, I think in terms of the legislative session, you have time. You have until, in other words, to seek something like this, you have time, because I think you probably have till February.
Well, it sounds like people want to make a decision now. It's a little frustrating because I'm not arguing against this proposal. I want to make sure that as an objective and conscientious board, we have the support of this. And I get very uncomfortable with generalizations like they have a high tendency to do bad things, basically. I mean, who's they and what's this population? And that's one person's perspective. So, and again, just because some people are manipulating the pathway doesn't mean it's not a viable option. I don't see that link. So there are some people getting this who possibly could be qualified, right? So I just want to be able to understand, the support for this, but.
The other thing, if
hold
I may.
Hold on, Mr. Vertito, real quick. Mr. Deerking was.
Yes, I found Mr. Vertito's comments very helpful. And I was thinking that we might have a resource in employers of the broad spectrum of professionals, hospitals, just anecdotally, to kind of flesh out my understanding. If there would be any difference in the professionalism or the impact on patient care, regarding issues that maybe wouldn't necessarily rise to the level of a discipline issue.
Sure.
But just to see if there is in practice, a difference in the skill sets between Method 3 and more traditional methods of licensure.
Employers would be a good source of information for that. Mr. Vertito?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Some of the things that I've seen schools been offering are, for Method 3, they include something like 2 weeks practicing clinical skills. People have to be willing to pay for that, and most of the students I've met for Clinical 3 don't get any type of formalized training. They may practice skills, but similar to monkey see, monkey do, rather than understand the theory and the concept behind why sterile gloves can't touch any part but sterile to sterile. The other part is the risk of the public. Typically, in the encounters I've had with numerous Method 3 applicants. CNAs are trying to learn the skills. I've had one LVN who was actually a Method 3 ask me how does she administer GT2 meds? And I'm trying to thinking, what, you didn't teach that in school? And her reply was, I didn't go to school, I challenged. So we have serious patient safety issues. Further, the complexity of patient care is one of the justifications some hospitals use that no longer allow LVNs in acute care, is because patients that are in ICU 20 years ago would never have lived that long, and the patients on the floor used to be in ICU, and the patients on the floor are now at long-term care or subacute. So the complexity of patient care, that if we're expected to be equal members of the healthcare team where LVNs cover that space between an RN and a CNA, we have to show the professional competence, skill, and most important, safety in executing the role of an LVN. And my personal feeling from exhibit and being a teacher for many years is that Method 3, its time has come to go away. It's putting the people of the health that need health care at risk from substandard nurses. So I'm pleased to see this, and that's one of the reasons I am fearful, is because these nurses do not meet professional standards.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were.
No,
I'm sorry. I thought you were making. Oh, I thought you were making a motion, so I was pausing.
Oh,
no, you don't have to. You don't have to.
My
Yeah,
motion
someone should make the motion.
My motion would be to move forward to look into actions to repeal the Business and Professions Code sections 2073 for VNs and 4511C3 for physical psychiatric technicians.
Thank you. I just want to clarify your intent. Is that to look? You said look into?
Look into and begin the process.
Begin process. To repeal those, is that correct?
To repeal those stated sections of the Business and Profession Codes.
Okay, I'll second to get it moving. Any further board discussion at this time? Since there is a motion on the floor, I believe we have to take public comment, of course. Is there any public comment at this time? I see one, maybe two. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Danetta Garcia. Had someone decided that my dyslexia was one of them and that I wasn't going to be something that I am now, I would have never been selected by CTB McGraw to be an evaluator for 5 states, to evaluate their math, science, history, and English for 5 states. So we are maybe saying that if you're experienced in education, you've got issues. You won't be able to rise to the level of a licensed vocational nurse, and one experience means it paints a broad brush on many others, on so many others. We've taken their money, we've cashed their checks, and there's a very good way when you turn, what I'm saying is an application costs money. When you submit it to the board, they cash the check. That's what I'm referring to.
Thank you.
But here's the most important part. If we want to see the status, you can go to enforcement and pull up as much record finding as you need to find out who's there, and if one of these individuals are there, and if they were experienced in education. The data's there. I used to also be an evaluator at the board. What the problem really is it takes a lot of time to do in the evaluation of an experience in education. They have to send in work experience documents. They have to make sure that they have supervisors who will sign off on all of this. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork, and they're pretty much the last people that are looked at as far as evaluating their documents. So if you choose to eliminate it, don't grandfather it in so that you take others who have already been waiting. Because you may have a lot of successful E&Es out there that are going to do great things, that are going to be great nurses. If you want to say you want to eliminate it, just simply say it takes time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of work. We're thinking of eliminating it because it causes a lot of backlogs. You probably have 1,000 sitting in the queue waiting to be processed. You probably do. Check it out.
Okay.
But the most important part of it is don't lay it on they could be criminals or they could be less competent or I found this and that and they, yeah, we can find this. Because I've been at the board long enough to see that a record of nursing program had a false document. I worked with Cheryl when we looked at documents. She said, DG, take a look at this. I was able to find false documents on a record of nursing licensee. That's how hard work she did to make sure if it came past her, she scrutinized it. So if you want to get rid of a program because it's not cost effective, put it that way, without adding all the other things. Because if they, in my time of growing up with dyslexia, if someone had said, she'll be nothing because she can't read like you do, that's the they we're talking about. And that's not what we want to ever hear discussed at our board.
Sure.
You mean more to the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I thought I saw some more movement. Do we have further public comment on this agenda item? Yes? Okay.
Hi, I do have a comment for this agenda. Actually, I was here just for the public
Sure.
thing, but this is actually something to do with me for the future.
Yes.
I do believe in this method of evaluating a student. I personally signed up for a program I'm going to tell you about later, but I was going to do the method 3-way because of my previous history, background medical, has been a certified phlebotomist, EKG, medical assistant, also took in pharmacology and other nursing classes. And from my understanding, when I had checked with the board before I got accepted I was actually going for the LVN program, but I was accepted for the PT program. I asked them to make sure, would this credit me allow me to take the LVN test because I wanted to bridge over to the RN. They did say yes, and I mentioned all the other classes I had. They said that would be sufficient. There are people out there that are really hoping to work this way because I personally, almost 25 years ago, I was an RN student, but I didn't get to finish it. So people have dreams, and they still want to succeed those dreams. Yes, there are a lot of cheaters, and that's my comment's going to be towards the end. There are a lot of cheaters, that's why I'm here. But for this program, I think it is important. I would suggest, and let me tell you, what in the county of Riverside and Riverside Community College, they have a program. It's not really a program, it's a class. And he talked about clinical thinking. Before you even get considered for this class, it's a 5-unit class, 3 subjects actually put in one. It's very heavy. It has to do with clinical thinking for pre-LVN students. And also pharmacology, which I would have taken that, but I would suggest they should put that as a requirement to set up just for the college, not these vocational adult schools, because now I don't trust them. But for the colleges, I know they have these prerequisites classes before you get considered. Make that as a mandatory class for these students that want to be considered as a method program, because this is going to get them to think and say, am I able to figure out and to do the SOAPing, or the SOAPy they call it, am I able to think? And as for clinical, there's also classes that they teach you your clinical to enhance your clinical skills. And some colleges has it and some don't, but that would be my suggestion.
Ma'am, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. You're speaking kind of fast.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm just nervous.
I believe what your suggestion is to add prerequisite courses to the
Add a
method
prerequisite,
3.
yes, at least 3 of them, because they told me you need that pharmacology. I said, I've had pharmacology 20-something years ago. They said, can you get it up to date? I go, oh, yes, I can. And I did. I prove it. Do you have pre-nursing? And I said, oh, I could get it. I got it. Besides being enrolled in another program, just to show that I'm competent enough, even though I have all these states and national certifications, I'm competent enough to say I'm competent to even take the LVN test. So I would suggest get them, Riverside Community College has a good program for prerequisites.
Okay.
And other schools should look into that.
Yes.
And go with the college level, please, because I went to an adult school, I did not know that. I'll let you know when I come up with my complaint. I'm very dissatisfied, and I'm not used to the games that they played, false misrepresentation on their
So I
program.
think you're saying that during public comment, you're going to have
I'm
another
going to
issue
mention
to
that
bring up.
part, yes.
Okay, let's hold
Okay,
that
so
one then.
I would hope that, please don't, there's a lot of ladies my age that really wants to finish their dreams.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much for the input.
Ma'am?
Mr.
if-
Bertito? Yes.
Thank you. Please don't take this as an insult, but it's an example of what I'm worried about. When you stated soaping, it's actually a form of documentation.
Yes, exactly, documentation, yes,
But
it's subjective,
not-
objective, yes.
But it's not necessarily, that's more charting rather than coming up with a nursing care plan.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. They teach you nursing, clinical thinking. You have to. It's a heavy course. It's a 5-unit course. They combine clinical thinking.
Yes, ma'am. We don't need to get into
Okay.
all the details
So
right now, but
that particular
thank
school,
you, Mr.
it's-
Bertito, for that
and actually, that school's the #1 in our state of California for LVNs. That school's #1.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's on your record.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
I have
Ms. Avella.
a question. I actually have a question maybe Cheryl can help me out with. So we were talking about how we said 20% of people passing the NCLEX are these people, the equivalency grads, roughly. That's what we said in here?
No.
20%, okay, out of... Is that what it is, about 20%?
I believe, Cheryl, what you said, correct me if I'm wrong, I just want to make sure we're really clear.
It was my question. So further, of the total candidate population passing the VN licensure examination or PT licensure examination, approximately 80% are program grads, the remaining 20% are equivalency candidates. Does that mean that out of 100, doesn't that mean that out of 100 people passing, 20% are equivalency?
As I said, what we were addressing, and this is the same thing that I said before, on any licensure exam is what has been presented to you before, not only by us, but by your exam professionals, the vendors. 20 to 25% of any sample population typically fail. It's usually a 70 to 30.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the passing.
If what you're asking is, can we break that further down to say how many of those individuals are equivalency? A great percentage of them are. If what
Okay.
you'd like for us to do is to go back and come back with the percentage of equivalency candidates who fail,
I don't think that's going to be necessary. I'm just, does anyone see my issue with this? Okay.
Well, I do, but I thought-
So is that what this says?
Yes, you're saying of the total candidate population passing the VN, 80% of them are program graduates, 20% of, so out of 100 people, 20 of those people were equivalency people that passed the test.
Okay.
Yes, I got
So
it.
they're basically 20% of the people that pass are these people?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how many people this affects, right? That's what I'm getting to.
Right.
So how many, okay, this is not going to be an exact calculation.
So
This
I
is
think
sort of
it's-
rough. So how many VNs are there out there? 144,000? Okay, hang on.
Roughly.
So we're talking about almost 30,000 people.
But they're already licensed, they're not
That's
affected.
correct.
I understand.
So that's why I'm saying the application's on the back of my note.
Okay. So there are 30,000 people, 20% of people that pass are these people. What I'm saying is that if you look at that and sort of work backwards and think about the number of people that are trying to get through this pathway, it's not an insignificant number.
Right. the
So
part
what
that you're
I'm
missing is the
saying,
people that failed. The part that you're missing is the people that failed. 'Cause
I
what you-
understand that. I'm
yeah.
talking about the number of people this would affect. Okay, so I don't know, but we're talking about right now a body of 28,000 people that wouldn't have been able to get their license. Okay, so what I'm saying is yeah, there's a fair amount of anecdotal evidence out there. Okay, I'm glad for anecdotal evidence. It's not enough for me to actually close this pathway right now.
Gotcha.
But Cheryl, can I ask, of those equivalencies, wouldn't it be some are transfer, or moved from other states, possibly,
Yes.
that would also be equivalency
Yes.
to take the exam, or no?
Yes. And we have a very high...
Not necessarily all from method 3.
Some could.
And also
The other thing, though, that you need to look at is on the table on the back, that tells you the numbers, how increased the number of applications that we're getting on equivalency. That this, I think it came up with 91.75%. If you look at your chart on the back, that's your increase from 2010 to 2015, the number of applications we're getting that are all equivalency.
And that's your
So
total.
it's not that it's going away, we're getting a much increased number.
And it's also not 30,000, so I think that's the other part I want to get to, which I think, because I think Board Member Avila is absolutely right. We don't want to just completely cut our whole segment of the population. And so that's what I think Cheryl is trying to illustrate, is that we're looking at a little less than 2,500, and that's what I think you're trying to say, is we get some that's an influx from other states, we get some that's an influx from international, and that's actually where we do have a large concern.
So, yes, international candidates, out-of-state candidates, we know we have a lot of people moving to California, also show up on the numbers indicated in that 20%, along with the Method 3 candidates. Okay, I believe we were at public comment. We had 2 public comments. I don't believe I see any more public comment coming to the podium. Sorry. There is a motion on the floor and a second. Any further board discussion before we take the roll call vote?
Yes, I think we need more information before moving.
Thank you.
Samantha?
Yes.
Would this be possible for, in order to get more information, have it sent to the Education Committee to investigate? Or review? Before just closing or trying to close it out?
I'm thinking back to this morning when we delegated authority to our Education Committee.
It wasn't a delegation of authority, you were delegating them work to do, so.
Yes. Could we
if you're
delegate this work to
Yes,
them?
you could delegate items for them to do if you vote on that.
Okay. So yes, it looks like it is possible. I believe we have to deal with the motion on the floor first.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay. But thank you, that is a good thought. That could be utilized in that way. There's a motion on the floor and a second, I believe.
We're probably going to vote on this.
I believe the motion, Mr. Vertito, would you like to repeat your motion?
My motion is to begin the process to research and move forward on repeal of Business Professions Code Sections 2873 for VN, 4511C3 for physical therapy, psychiatric technician, to repeal this method or this procedure
Thank
for
you.
these codes.
Thank you. That's helpful. So I'll start with the roll call vote. Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza?
No.
Vice President Moreno?
No.
I'm a yes. Mr. DeBronstein is absent. Ms. Avella?
No.
Mr. Deerking?
No.
Okay, so the motion fails. Is there an alternative motion that might be put forward?
I make a motion to have the Education Committee review and bring it back to the board for possible action.
Is anyone, I'll repeat the motion because I'm not sure everyone heard you, is to refer research of this issue to the Education Committee, who would then return to the full board with more information and further discussion.
I have an issue. I think there would be bias there. I would not be in favor of that.
Yeah, and we don't have a second yet, so Anyone willing to second Ms. Mendoza's motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. This motion, now we have a new motion, so I believe at this time, we need to take further comment, public comment on this motion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, is there any public comment on the motion as proposed by Ms. Mendoza? Okay, I'm not seeing any movement coming up. Therefore, we will take a roll call vote. Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
No.
I'm a yes. Ms. Avella?
No.
Mr. Durking?
No.
Okay, so that's a 3-3 split vote, so that fails, I believe.
That's true.
So that motion also fails. So at this time, we've had 2 failed motions. I'll look to legal to,
Would you like to put it on a future agenda and have more information brought back to the board?
Well, isn't Dr. Brown free to do that regardless? I mean, so I guess you can decide.
so, but now I'm worried about like how it was agenda. Do we need a vote because we were forced
You're
to
not
take a
forced
vote?
to take action. You're not forced to reach a, no, you're fine.
No, okay, next thing.
So at this point, I think you should prioritize what you would need to do.
So the only thing we
So we're fine with not having any official action on this item, understanding that it will be further researched by staff, correct? Everyone's good with that? Yes?
Yes.
Mr. Durking, Isabella?
I think you're asking them to take a motion on a negative.
We will get there. So at this time, we're going to take no official action on this item. That leads us to 24A3, clarification on the Enforcement Task Force recommendation on authority to delegate adoption of default decisions. I'm just pausing for a second because I remember a conversation with legal about this.
Well, I think given the time, the first question might be whether this can be, which items can be tabled. And so that's a policy question, of course, but.
Maybe, yeah. But I'm trying to remember the conversation we had this morning. Oh, yes, I remember. So basically, what I was going to say to the board members, the ones remaining, is that you have we have discussed this in the past, most recently 2014. We're just bringing the issue back up, and the issue is whether to proceed with legislation to delegate adoption of default decisions to the executive officer. We actually officially would need to vote on this again. It's been a while.
How do we need to vote on this again? This was passed by the board.
You're correct, and I had many conversations with staff and council and DCA over the past couple months about why this is needed. Rebecca, I'm going to lead into it and let me know if
Or I could cut to the chase if you'd like.
I'll lead into it.
Oh, okay.
And so then there was some confusion possibly about the language. We had a different council at the time. We've had a couple executive officers. We've gone through 3 since this was first brought forth by the task force. So there was some confusion over whether this action would be pursued by regulatory means or legislative means. We've had confirmation from the Deputy Director of Legal Services at Department of Consumer Affairs that this would have to be a legislative action, and such, we would need to revote to move to take legislative action. So that's where we're at. You are correct in saying that we have seen this before and we have voted on it. It was advised to us to have to revote on this action and specify that it's a legislative change that we're seeking.
Okay, is Bernice still here?
No.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure that new board members felt like they had the information they needed to have to vote on this.
Yes,
So,
I'm familiar with this.
Mr. Durkin,
Okay.
would you like some background on this?
Not if you don't need it.
I'm familiar with the issue.
Okay.
Okay.
Because the board had voted in principle, I guess not in the method,
Right.
to actually approve delegation of default decisions to the EO.
Yes, and it was, I was also, had the same confusion as you did as to why it was being brought back forth. And after many, many, many conversations, this was what was determined, so this is where we're at. I'm sorry. Any specific questions about this proposal? Everyone is also familiar with this proposal. Mr. Deerking has indicated he is familiar with the proposal. Does anyone feel comfortable making a motion?
Oh, to make the motion? Yes, I make the motion.
I'll second it as.
Let me clarify what motion is being made exactly. I mean, I know you mentioned delegating the authority to adopt default decisions to the EO. That's the issue is the method in which that is achieved, and so I presume you mean that you're looking to you're seeking legislative ability to do that.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And as in 2014, I will second Ms. Avella's motion. Any public comment on this item at this time? This is default decisions. I don't see any coming forward. Any further discussion by board members? If not, I will proceed to the roll call vote, starting with Mr. Vertito.
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Ms. Avella?
Yes.
And Mr. Durkin?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. And Dr. Brown, you're comfortable with the motion? Yes.
Madam President, just to let you know, our staff has to be on a flight in less than 40 minutes when they start boarding.
Okay.
I'd like to see if we can move a little bit quicker.
Sure.
By tabling items 26 and 28. We've done numerous 27s. I think we could table 27.
I don't
and-
believe we can table public comment not on the agenda.
All right,
the
then
only
at
one we
least
can't.
No.
do a voice vote on 25 and
Sure.
unless there's major discussion, but I'd like to see if we could take care of our staff and get them on the plane.
Of course. And what I would like to say is I thought that more staff would have already left. There was some discussion earlier of, I know the NEC's left, so I'm actually surprised to see this many staff members here. Dr. Brown, do we need the staff members? Or?
We're here trying to support the board and facilitate your work.
I don't believe that we need the staff members here at this time. We have Dr. Brown here, who's our employee. Thank you. So we have moved on. There is a proposal by Mr. Vertito. I'm not sure if you'd like to move to table 26 to a later meeting.
Yes.
And what about 24B?
24B also?
I agree with that because I know that the schools will have much input into that, and we have very few schools here. So there is a motion to table 24B and 26 to the November 3rd meeting. And Cheryl and Dr. Brown, you can let the schools know that we've tabled the fixed pass rate discussion until November. Okay, thank you. Because the school input on that is important. I will second your motion. Any public comment on tabling these items? Further board discussion, seeing none, I will take a roll call vote starting with Mr. Deerkin.
Yes.
Ms. Avella?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza?
Yes.
Mr. Vertito?
Yes.
Okay. So that leaves us only with 25, which is review and adopt executive officer's report on decisions for vocational nursing and psychiatric technician programs. Dr. Brown, we have received your report and we have reviewed it in its entirety. Are there any questions from board members at this time?
Vote to accept the report as presented.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
I'll second it.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor, on the table, and a second. Is there any public comment about accepting report agenda item 25, Executive Officer's Report on Decisions. Okay, seeing none, I'll take a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Vertito.
Yes.
Ms. Endozo?
Yes.
Vice President Moreno?
Yes.
I'm also a yes. Ms. Avella?
Yes.
And Mr. Deerking?
Yes.
Thank you. That leads us to the end of our agendized business. The most important thing left at the end is we have public comment for items not on the agenda. Let me just scroll down here. Agenda item number 27, public comments on items not on the agenda. Individuals may appear before the board at this time to discuss items not on the agenda. The board may not discuss or take any action on an item raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the agenda on a future meeting pursuant to government section, code section 11-125, 11-125.7A. Are there any comments from members of the public?
I do
Good
have
evening.
a comment, but first, how much time do I have?
Can you speak into
How much time do I have?
Generally 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, my name is Barbara Torres, and I'm actually a former student of Hassan de la Puente Adult School. That was not the choice of my school, and like I said, I tried it. I was the medical. I'm getting nervous. I used to work for City of Hope. The medical chief officer is Alexander Levine. She suggested, because of my work habits, to finish my schooling for nursing. And I said the easiest way is to bridge over.
Sure.
I applied for the LVN. I did not get in. They put me into the Psych Tech program. So I went into the Psych Tech program. From the first semester, things were good. I was an A student, and I had that transcript to prove it. However, I did not realize they were falsifying and giving people misrepresentation of the school. They had stated that you had to be over 18 to be enrolled in the program, not knowing that there was 2 students that were under the age of 18. Our clinical for the first semester was delayed for 4 months until those students turned 18. Along with that, there were 11 students that did not pass the FB federal.
It's okay. It's okay.
The FBI, DOJ clearance. There were 11. Those particular students were assigned not to go to on-site clinicals, but the clinical sites were in a classroom. That's not a real complaint here. It's when I entered the second semester of the class, there was a woman named Donna Nelson. She was physically attacking students with toy guns and throwing objects, and she was doing it to me. Not just that, she verbally, remember, I'm just upset because she verbally accosted me. She was so belligerent. I happened to be the oldest one there. She even, as I would leave the classroom, she told students that she was out for me, literally talking really bad, which I did not understand. I just happened to be the oldest student in the classroom. I did not go along with her playing games. She gave people really bad nicknames. Besides that, we were assigned to go to a clinical, it's called the Development Disability Rehabilitation Center in the city of Fontana, off on Cote Street and Foothill. We were like 3.5 months from finishing our program. We had not even learned the word, the Ladderman Act. When the director of that site said, he told the whole class of 28 kids, tell me what you know about the Ladderman Act. Tell me what you think about it. We all looked at each other, even me. I'm the A student there. I'm the number 1. Besides saying who I am, my girls, I have 3 daughters. 2 are valedictorian, USC graduate, and UCLA. And what was so shocking and embarrassing, we didn't even talk about that subject in the classroom. So we go to a place we had no knowledge that we were supposed to be familiar with these terms.
That was your second semester?
That was my second semester with a woman named Donna Nelson. She also failed to supervise the clinical sites. Like I said in the beginning, I was an RN student one time in my life. We always had supervision. We always had a nurse there with us in clinical sites. She would just let students wander on. I had witnessed students would come in, sign in, and take off to the park. They didn't care. Along with that, we had students in the classroom smoking pipes. And one student gave Miss Nelson a blue pipe as a gift, and she took it. There was a lot of chaos, and when I addressed this to Miss Anderson, she was the director of the nursing program, Sharon Anderson, I said this in front of another instructor named Miss Jones. Ms. Jones said, a friend of Sherman Anderson, and I was there because I was telling her, you know, they're smoking pipes in the classroom. She goes, so what? You're not smoking it. Leave them alone. This is the type of chaos that was in class. We had students jumping on tables. She kind of, Ms. Nelson kind of encouraged this behavior because of her shooting guns at them with toy guns, that is, with softball, Nerf balls, they were called. And I said, I don't want to be hit. What she was aiming would bother me a lot too. And they were African-American young boys. They didn't say anything. And they tolerated that humiliation from this lady. And she wanted me, because I was sitting towards the back, she told Ms. Anderson she wants me to sit in the front so she could aim a gun at me. And at that time, we had some violent stuff on the news, and I was scared because I'm thinking, oh, she's teaching the kids it is appropriate to misbehave this way. It was not appropriate. Okay. Then we had another clinical site to go to Ontario Mill Mall.
This was your third semester?
The same lady, Ms. Nelson, the clinical. Well, I'm calling it the second semester because it was or maybe the third term. The same lady, Ms. Nelson, was the clinical teacher. Out of all the students, she was to supervise all of us. She didn't tell us to come with she told us not to come with a uniform and no tags. So students came like shorts, cut off, sleeveless, showing all their tattoos, and then she assigned us to go as groups to run off around the campus and act. She didn't say act crazy. She goes, we want you to act retard. You're going to act a retard. And then she pointed to me, you're going to be the retard, and we're going to chase you. And then she pointed to some of the other students, and we're going to chase you. I said, but how would they know that we're students and doing this thing? I don't want to do this. And she goes, well, you're going to fail this if you don't do it. I said, well, I don't want this. And so one student started chasing me with a pen, and I ran to the security guard, and I went to report this, and security administration from that location came and talked to this instructor and said, you cannot have this type of conduct in class. I mean, in this mall, you have to get prior approval, and not just that. How would we know these are students? Because there was no badge, nothing to identify these people. So there was ongoing behavior. Along with this woman insulted me, saying really bad words. Mr. Hernandez even witnessed the cursing going on in class, this lady, and I never cursed back. What I want to say, one more thing. They falsified that I took an inmate out of Patton State Hospital. And Carlos Lunas wrote a letter in my behalf. Barbara Torres had nothing. She didn't even, addressing to the school because they dismissed me immediately from the school. Mr. Carlos Lunas addressed a letter saying that there was no inmate taken out and your school is fabricating this story. Because what they did when I started my clinical site, they dismissed me. They told me to pay your money in full on April the 30th, pay it all in full. Besides that, paying in full, they didn't let me in the door. They blocked me. They said they blocked me, so I had to use a credit card. And then I went for clinical. And then on a Friday, there was no school on May the 4th. They told me to come in. I went into the office.
Ma'am?
They said, you are dismissed because you took an inmate out of prison. They said,
very
wait, this
serious.
is important. Because Carlos Lunas is the executive director of Patton State Hospital. You people need to know about it. And I have a letter addressed from him to me, addressed to the school on the misbehavior and the conduct of that school. And we had so many complaints that day.
I have a question.
It was ridiculous.
I'm not trying to cut you off. I have a question for you. What year did you go to this program?
I went there and I'm waiting. I came here so late because I was threatened that if I ever voice my opinion, I'm going to have repercussions, but that's not how they said it. You'll be getting it.
What year did you go
November, 2011 to 2012.
2011. I'm writing down.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing is that I'm extremely alarmed and extremely disturbed by all the
I went to
things,
the
hold on one second, by all the things that you have said. And it's not acceptable. The things that you have reported are not acceptable. So what I need you to do is make a formal complaint to the board, because you're telling the board members this now, but we are not the staff that are capable of investigating this, and this needs to be investigated. And I want your concerns heard, but I want you to know that we as board members are not staff that work every day to investigate it. However, this is Dr. Kamika Brown. She is our executive officer, and she oversees all the staff. And what I want you to do is, I don't want you to leave here today until you get the phone number for Dr. Brown and she gets your information. And what I want you to promise me that you're going to do is make a formal complaint to the board through the normal process.
Okay, is
Can
that
you
under the Business Bureau? Was that the Business Bureau?
What? No.
When you make, that's
No,
not
no,
the
no,
same?
no, no, no.
Okay.
Business and Bureau, no. This is, we have a formal complaint process. These are things.